Hey guys, welcome to the channel. This is the 7th part of What If Issei Was Never Resurrected. Before I start, please do support for more awesome content and subscribe my channel and like the video. Also share this video with your friends. Let's start the video. Their meeting had started a bit different as most people, who knew the situation, would have imagined it. With Ravel literally tackling and throwing her arms around him. Issei. I am so happy to see you again, she called out. Well, technically it seems I was here the entire time, as it looks like, Issei pointed out, giving a look to his counterpart. Yes, but he is not the same Issei, and he has his own Ravel, as you see, she replied, smiling. By the way, my parents have given their agreement. That means we can be together. Actually, they sounded quite enthusiastic about the idea of me being with the Red Dragon Emperor. She grinned. Even if I will be only one of many. Next came Murayama, who was a bit more reluctant, but then draw him into a hug as well. It is good to see that you are back, she said. And, was your mission a success? To be honest, it was a complete disaster, he replied. We were outnumbered. The reason we came back here is because we were, well, running for our lives. That is also why we have brought them with us. The 4 exorcists in question had said nothing so far, and were looking quite uneasy. No wonder. After all, they were surrounded by a group that consisted not only of exact doubles of themselves, but also to a great part of devils, fallen angels and even creatures they had not even heard of. Not to mention that one of Issei's doppelgangers had just been proposed to by a devil. There is no need to be afraid of us, Darian addressed them. Nobody here will harm you. Azazel and the Mao Lucifer will tell you the same thing. Azazel. Seer's ex Lucifer. The exorcist Issei said, recognizing them. Who are you? He asked Darian. That question is a bit complicated to answer. We will explain everything to you. For now, you should just know, I am in charge of this base, he told them. You are a member of the Green Lantern Corps, he was looking at Sylar. Yes. I was accidentally sent into the same universe your group here was scouting, along with the creatures you call the Shah, she responded. I see. We have heard about the incident, but we didn't know what happened to you, Darian told her. You better come with me. We will contact your superiors and we will inform them about the situation. He turned to the Issei, Raynor and Irina and the others who came from the future timeline. And you should get acquainted with your other selves now, he said to them with a look of their Issei's guardian team, tell them everything you told us. A moment later, he, the alien Sylar and Odin, who had come back from the Asgard of Issei's world, as he had heard about what had happened in Kuo as the new group arrived, disappeared. The others did what Darian had suggested. But the first thing they did was giving their exorcist counterparts a brief explanation about the multiple universes and about who they were. Hold on for a second, I remember now. I know you as well, exorcist Issei said, as he looked at Raynor. You're the girl who had asked me out. Yuma, wasn't it? But you looked a bit different back then. And you certainly had different clothes, he added, his eyes wandering over Raynor's revealing leather outfit. You like what you see? She asked him. By the way, what had happened then? Raynor wanted to know. You are still human as I see. And given my plans were to kill you, she suggested. Has someone resurrected you? Or did you kill me instead in your world? After a fierce duel in the sundown, that we two had, she nearly made it sound as if the idea were somehow romantic. What? No. Nothing like that happened, he responded. I just turned you down and left. I sensed that you were a fallen angel and thought dating you was not a good idea. A short time later you ambushed me and tried to kill me. But I thought you off, until the devils suddenly arrived a few minutes later and you retreated. I never saw you again afterwards. Wait. You mean you had actually turned me down? Me. Raynor stared at him outraged. Really? You had just suspected that he had killed your other self and you didn't seem that bothered by it, Irina remarked. But you find out that he didn't want to go out with you and you act as if it is the worst thing in the world, she asked incredulous. If he had killed me, defending himself, it would be understandable. But this, I am a fallen angel. He should have been fallen to his knees at the mere chance to be with me, she said in a clearly exaggerated tone. It was obvious to them that she wasn't completely serious. He should be overwhelmed by the idea that I would even look at him. Ow. She suddenly cried out, as Irina had suddenly slapped her over the head. Why did you do that? She asked irritated. You told me that, whenever you started to act like an arrogant bitch, I should do this. I am only doing what you want. Irina smiled at her backquote innocently. The others in the room couldn't help themselves and started to laugh. Even the older Raynor from the parallel future started to fall in. It seems you have actually found a way to keep me under control, Issei-kun, she said laughing. After a few moments, the younger Raynor was starting to smile as well. XXX. Someone else who now greeted Issei and his return team was Kuroka. Issei-kun, how nice to finally meet you, she greeted him. I am Kuroka, Sharon's older sister. And one of your lovers in our world, she added by laying forward and whispering into his ear. He had of course heard about Kaneko's sister, or Sharon's, as her birth name was. By what he had first heard from Rias peerage, she was a crazy murderer. But after seeing the recordings from a few of the parallel realities and his own experiences, he always had his doubts there. He knew devil servants didn't need to be crazy to kill their masters, the opposite, in many cases actually. And given that both Kanekos here were now completely relaxed around her, she was clearly not a killer. Kuroka was wearing her usual kimono, that was hanging nearly open around her upper body and with a complete show of her cleavage. And no visible bra. Issei's eyes were, being who he is, wandering to her boobs. Since he had been recruited by the Guardians, he had learned greater self-control, instead of just blindly following his urges, and to actually think things through for the most part. But he was still Issei Hyodo. Kuroka, of course, noticed as well where his gaze had turned to. You can touch them if you want, she said, gripping her own breasts, lifting them up a little, so that they nearly burst out of her clothes and presenting them to him. What had he just thought? No, he was taking it back. She definitely was a killer. XXX. A short time later, Sarisvam Lucifer. Valley's grandfather. He is the leader of Chaos Brigade. Issei murmured, after hearing about the events that happened in their world. Well, technically it is still Office right now, future Rias responded, but she is more of a figurehead for their actions. Even in this time. And he is planning to release an invincible monster that could destroy the world. Irina asked. Yes, future, Issei confirmed. This has to be the being Crossell had mentioned, Raynor commented. The one he was planning to control. That is quite sure, Gariel said. Trihexa. I have heard about it before. A monster created by the great darkness Ariman, to serve as his manifestation in our worlds, after the last one vanished. Does that mean this creature also exists in our world? The Exorcist Holy Sword Wilder version of Issei asked. That is very likely, Gariel replied. Since our worlds are all so close to each other historically. They all had heard the story that their, as they heard, time-traveling, counterparts had told them. War, terror, destruction, the attacks of Chaos Brigade and then Trihexa and the Dark Order themselves, it was all what could happen in their own future as well. Ariman. Issei said the word. The force that was standing behind the Lords and the Dark Order. He had heard about it a few times while he was here. But it had mostly been talked about like a distant threat, just like the Lords for the most part. And now he heard that he had actually manifested himself in a world very similar to his own. It was a frightening thought. He, the Dark Order and their agents, he murmured. Yes, shortly after Trihexa, they were beginning to appear everywhere, future Sona stated. Aside from beings actually working for the Dark Order, it was also people who were, well, possessed. Countless people died alone through them. But they were not the only ones. Beings like Loki or Kokobel formed a pact with them, future Rias told them. Even some devils were working for the Dark Order, she said a bit hesitatingly, remembering her own role, that was all but graceful. They formed a group called the Four Horsemen. They were running attacks and spreading, even more, terror everywhere, until we managed to stop them, future Raynor explained. But in the end, they were only a symptom of the true threat. It was stopped in the end, future Issei told them, and Ariman drew back from our world. Our world returned to normal, more or less, future Sona resumed. But what was left of the three factions and the entire supernatural world were even more weakened. To that came that during the battles, the existence of the supernatural had been revealed to the humans. Many of them blamed all of us for the destruction. It is not only that Sona, the future version of Rias, said. Think about it. We have taken over some of their cities, places they had built, and declared them "our territory," without even telling them. We have taken members of their race and turned them into ours for our own gain, also often without even asking, or when they were in a desperate situation when they couldn't say no. And then demanded from them that they serve us, and threatened to hunt them down and kill them if they refuse. Fallen angels, in turn, targeted and killed humans if they possessed a sacred gear, while we just transformed and enslaved them. Some of us had even kidnapped and tormented them for sport. And the rest of us never made any real effort to stop them. We acted as if their world belonged to us and they had no say in it. And now it came all back to us, when they had kicked us out of our reality. In some sense, we got exactly what we deserved. All of them were looking stunned at what they had just heard her saying. And you are sure that you are truly Rias Grimori? The present version of Raynor asked her sarcastically. Believe me, even I can learn. After the metaphorical and practical ultimate ass-kicking your counterpart and some others gave me back then, and the things that happened afterwards. Trust me, I know how it is when someone treats you as if you are below them. She told them that with an expression that was nearly frightening, at least to her younger self. You should know one thing. I have learned to hate the person I have been, she said, giving a quick sharp look to her younger counterpart. After this, they had begun to talk with each other about their own lives as well. Issei, all three of him, had to admit what they heard was quite interesting, and in some cases shocking. XXX, so do I get this right? Raynor, Irina, Asia, Zenobia, Rias Grimori, Akeno, Kaneko's older sister, Ravel, one of Valley's teammates, and a few other girls I don't know anything about. All of them, Issei exclaimed. Wow, you are truly the harem king the first always wanted to be. His counterpart only grinned at him. By what I have seen, you are not doing so bad yourself. Your relationship with Raynor-chan is going far better than mine had been in the beginning. So much is clear, he said. And then you have Asia, Irina and Gariel, and now Ravel, as it looks. Not to mention what me and Issei did last night, Warner stated suggestively. You and Kala. Now that is a surprise, future Raynor commented. Or when I think about it, not so much. Her breast size is quite your thing, isn't it, Issei-kun? You say it, he replied happily. Has my other self ever told you how sorry I am about killing you? Yes, many times, his own Raynor said sharply. Good. Hold up. Does that mean you have slept with every single member of the group for this expedition? Murayama suddenly questioned. That means with all female members of our team, except Zenobia and me. Yes, Issei said smiling. What shall I say? I am a teenage boy. But Zenobia is Kiba's girlfriend after all. Well, does that mean I will be your next target? She asked, crossing her arms. I will be next. Human, Ravel declared. Besides that, who said that he even likes you? He certainly does. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been peeking on me so often in school. Murayama scoffed. Oh, he likes everything that had legs and especially a pair of boobs, future Raynor pointed out. But he only loves a few of us, right Rias? She said with a side look at her version of the red-headed devil and a grin. Future Rias only showed an unreadable expression in response to her words. The four exorcist counterparts of Issei, Irina, Zenobia, and Kiba were just listening slack-jawed. Exorcist Issei could barely believe what kind of a life his two doubles had. Okay, he admitted he certainly had his kinky sides, but this too. They are both complete perverts, he exclaimed. His three comrades were similar shocked. Secretly, however, their Irina, standing next to him, was also fantasizing about the two Isseis, who were obviously far more perverted than their own, would do with her, given the chance. XXX. If you want to, you can also do it with me, Issei. Future Zenobia from the parallel future spoke up, addressing the present guardian Issei. Zenobia, the Irina from the same world, standing next to her, said loud. What? We are all technically the same persons, right? So he is still Issei. And since the me, of this world as with Kiba, I wanted to give him a chance to try me out as well. To see how it feels doing it with me. Xenovia. All three Irinas shouted this time. I mean, when we are all the same, it wouldn't be cheating, right? We could, for example, try it with 2 Isseis at once. That would be interesting, don't you think? Or maybe he with 2 Raynors or Rias, or maybe even with 2 Irinas and then. Xenovia. All the girls around shouted, now outraged, even the other 2 Xenovias. Well, maybe we should at least keep the idea in mind, the future version of Akeno spoke up, grinning. Having 2 Issei-kuns have their way with me at the same time would surely be something completely different. Akeno. Most of the girls shouted now instead. Or maybe we could double team one of them. What do you think, younger me? I promise you, Issei-kun knows how to treat a lady like us. Oh, imagine seeing myself in pain and pleasure. She purred and smiled wickedly at her other self. They all saw that the younger Akeno was actually blushing deeply, and it took a lot to cause her of all people to blush. That is truly enough, Akeno, future Rias said. The others noticed that she was red in the face as well. XXX. Well, your doubles are maybe the ones who have several women Issei at once, but the girls are the ones who are all too willing to go along with it, right? Kiba's exorcist counterpart pointed out, and they actually seemed to be quite happy with it. Very right, Kiba, Issei said. Why are you calling me Kiba? The blonde-haired boy questioned. My name is Isaiah. Issei was confused for a moment. The name Kiba Yuto was actually given to me by Bucho, after what happened to me in the Holy Sword Project. The Kiba from the Grimoire Peerage, the one from this time, informed him. The still remaining anger was clear to him for everyone around. And you became a devil, his exorcist counterpart stated. Yes, Rias Grimoire saved my life by transforming me. And after what happened, I certainly didn't want anything to do with the church anymore, he said grimly. So you joined a group that can be less trusted, his double responded. Rias isn't like most devils, Kiba said. She is one of the few who actually treats her servants well and with respect. Before or after she tricked them into serving her in the first place? Isaiah asked him sarcastically. Tell him, the older Rias said to her younger counterpart. What? The younger one called out. Tell him the exact circumstances how he came to serve you. It has taken me far too long to come clean myself, about many things. What is she talking about, Bucho? Present Kiba asked her. Rias gritted her teeth. She knew she would have some explaining to do, and she had to thank her other self for that fact. She could only hope that Yuto would understand why she had acted that way back then. If she had known that Valper and his henchmen would kill everyone, then, but she didn't, and in the end, she had waited too long. XXX. You know. I agree with you, Issei, the Xenovia from the Exorcist group said. These girls seem to be just as perverted as your own doubles, especially the ones who claim to be from the future. Maybe it is a side effect of being turned into a devil. But not all of them are devils, their Irina reminded her. One of my doubles is even an angel. She must have become corrupted, Exorcist Xenovia speculated. The only question is why she hadn't fallen yet. Maybe you two have just been closet perverts from the beginning, Akeno suggested, smirking. Oh yes. They truly are, future Akeno said. You should see the things their older counterparts are doing with Issei-kun. And how they are always screaming for him when he is doing them. No, it's not that, Exorcist Irina stammered. At the same time, however, she was trying to push down fantasies about Issei doing the same things with her. Exorcist Xenovia next to her was blushing deeply as well. Of course not, Akeno countered sweetly. I think that is enough, Issei, the one from the Guardian group, stated. His voice was suddenly dead serious. It was nice getting to know each other. But we all still have a great problem to take care of. I don't know what these Shah are planning, but by all what I have heard about them, it can't be good. His exorcist counterpart nodded. I hate to admit it, but we had no chance, he stated. We were not only badly outnumbered, I also had the feeling that the few of them who were actually fighting us were not even serious. If you hadn't come, we would have been dead. We have also not shown everything we can in this fight, present-day Issei admitted. But you are right, there was just too many. And we don't even know much about these guys. Well, we might have never heard about the Shah, but we have met and fought the hero faction, future Issei spoke up. We know them and can help you prepare for them. We might even be able to help some of you to develop your powers somewhat further, future Raynor said. At least for a few of you. After all, we are basically the same as you, with more experience and extra powers we had picked up on the way. You want to help us train? Irina asked. Not only that, she replied. I have been thinking about it for some time now and I think it might be possible for us to share some of our powers with you. I am thinking in first line of me, Issei and Rias here. Wouldn't that make you weaker? Present Rias questioned. Not necessarily, she replied. If we simply transfer some energy to you, our own should just replenish itself after a short time. And certain aspects of our power, we should be able to share with you, without actually losing anything ourselves. At least as long as we get something in return. She turned to the Issei from her world. I am thinking here about some of the energy I had absorbed from you and Didrag as I was bodiless, Issei-kun. Or a bit of the flesh you had received from Great Red to heal you. Or the magical connection me and Rias share with you. Future Issei nodded. I also sense some pretty unique powers in mine and Asia's counterparts, he said. Okay. I see what you mean. If we do this right, we might all turn out stronger than we have been before. That doesn't mean, however, that we shouldn't also try to train in the usual way. Train. Sharing powers. Don't you all forget about something. We have no time, Present Issei pointed out. The Shah and these "hero faction" of the Chaos Brigade are still in their world. He pointed to his exorcist counterpart and the others. And while we are standing here, they are for sure already working on whatever they are planning. You know Issei, I think this is where I can calm you down, Gariel told him. The time flow between the universe, you should know, doesn't necessarily have to be completely parallel. Actually, it is in fact quite independent from each other, to a degree at least, as the presence of our "future visitors" here should demonstrate. It should be possible for us to stay here for at least a few days and then travel back to the other universe at the same point in time when we have left it. That is possible, Zenobia asked stunned. As long as we don't change events that had already happened from the POV of our own worlds, yes, she answered. Cool, that was all Zenobia said to that. By the way, the Shah and their allies, does any of you have an idea what their plans might be? Issei questioned, looking from Gariel to his exorcist double and his group and back. This Karen and Cao Cao had told us that they are planning to bring the human race to the place they think it deserves, and free them from the influence of the supernaturals, exorcist Issei stated. A few of the others, especially the ones from the future timeline, were looking a bit insecure at his words, some even a bit ashamed. Just like the older Rias had said, they knew all too well that their race's treatment of humans in the past was nothing to be proud of. That probably means they plan to go against the supernatural world, especially the three factions, Gariel speculated. But they are still only a handful of people, no matter how powerful, present-day Sona stated. How could they hope to achieve that? By revealing the existence of the supernatural to the humans and turn them against us, future Sona pointed out. After the appearance of Ariman, that was more or less what happened in our future. Not that this would take much, future Raynor commented sarcastically. Like Rias-chan here said, the way we have treated them for the most part, we shouldn't be surprised. That might be. Present-day Raynor frowned. But I think it changes very little for us right now. We might know what they are intending, but we don't know how. Right, all what we can truly do, is returning to that world and trying to stop them, Present Issei confirmed. Suddenly they all sensed another presence manifesting itself on the planet close to them, an incredibly powerful presence. Moments later the figure of a young girl appeared in the room before them. Ophis. Several of them called out. I see you are back, future Issei greeted her. This means, are you the Ophis that came with us or the one of this time? He asked. I am both, she replied. I have merged with my counterpart from this time period, she stated. That means I now know about the events of both realities and I am of course also back to my full power. Well. That is good, future Issei replied a bit unsure. What are you planning to do now? He wanted to know. I will of course still follow my goal to find a way to remove Great Red from my home in the dimensional void, she stated. Of course. They all thought. Issei and the others weren't sure if they liked the thought. But this was Ophis, they would hardly be in any position to change her mind. Ophis' emotionless look wandered from one of them to the other. But I admit that there are other threats out there that are more important, she added a moment later. Her voice sounded far less emotionless than it was usual for her, nearly with a hint of intimidation. I don't want this future I have seen to repeat itself either. This surprised most of them, except the ones of them who came from the future timeline and knew what they were dealing with. But they all knew, all that could scare her of all people, even the slightest, was more than worrisome. But Issei Hyodo, you impress me now even more as you already did before, she stated, both versions of you. I will keep an eye on you and your comrades. With those words, she vanished once again. Well, I am not sure if I should be happy about this, Issei said. Believe me, I know what you mean, future Issei commented. And you Issei, you want to help us as well? Exorcist Issei asked. Yes, we can start to train together if you want. If there isn't anything else. Future Issei replied. Actually, there is one thing, Rias, the one from the present, said. I have a request. I have been thinking about this for a while now. Issei, I want to join your team. What? Issei said in surprise. I know we have not always been getting along. Okay, I have been a real pain for you, with my attempts to recruit you or with my family trying to blackmail you, she corrected herself. You can say that, he responded. But please give me a chance. You can need any help you can get right now. I promise you won't regret this, she asked him. And if I get out of line, you can always have Irina or Zenobia beat me up as well, right? She said with a side glance at Raynor, who only rolled her eyes. If you want to join them, I will as well, Present Akeno spoke up. And I as well, Kiba said. I will not leave you alone, Bucho, even if you owe me a few explanations. This was not his only motivation for wanting to join Issei's group. It would actually make it much easier to see Zenobia regularly. Rias, however, gulped. Thank you, but I am not sure if you will still be as eager to follow me when you know everything, she admitted. Have you not forgotten anything? Sona stated sternly. What about your position in Kuo? You cannot just leave everything behind. Normally you would be right, Sona, she replied. But you oversee. I have actually a perfect replacement for the position at hand, she said, looking at her completely surprised older counterpart. XXXXXXX. The evening of the next day they were walking together through the streets of the futuristic version of London, where the Guardian HQ was located close by. 4 humans, 1 fallen angel and 1 young devil. The little group was strolling through the town of the 27th century, trying to get a look at everything. They were nobody else than Issei, Raynor, Irina, Asia, Murayama and Ravel. Like Gariel had said, they had a few days before they would have to return. Days that they mostly used to prepare themselves, mostly. They had once again spent an entire day training in the facilities of the Guardian HQ, this time together with their future counterparts. But now they were getting a break from the training and some time for themselves. So they used the chance to take a closer look at the place. Their counterparts of the Exorcist group had decided to stay back at the mansion for today. But they too had said they were interested in seeing the town. Of course, a city of the far future is not something you see every day, even for people like them. With the exception of Ravel, they had all been in this world before. But so far they had only actually visited the town once before, during their last trip to this world. Right now, however, they were just spending some time for themselves. Ironically, the Issei, Raynor, Irina and Akeno from the future timeline had told them that they had also spent some time in the last days exploring the town. In the background behind them was the Big Ben Tower, that had been, as they had heard, completely restored about a century ago and was looking subtly different than in theirs, however only one of the many differences they noticed. Do you really think that is a good idea? Irina asked the others. I mean, Gariel said we had a few days, sure. But shouldn't we better use all of that time to prepare ourselves? You know perfectly well, we all have already pushed ourselves to our limit, Murayama pointed out. Not to mention future Raynor's idea to share their powers with you. We would only strain ourselves, but not making any progress if we tried. Of course, Murayama was also eager for the chance to finally actually see one of the parallel worlds she had heard about in detail and even more a future world like this, especially since she had been left out from the last mission. Since you have so much experience fighting other schoolgirls with wooden sticks, Ravel remarked sarcastically. Murayama glared at her for a short moment. I am practicing kendo. She pressed out irritated. Thank you very much, little bitch, she murmured under her breath. You know she is right, devil girl, Raynor interrupted them. We pushed ourselves as far as we could right now. Tomorrow we will then try what our counterparts had offered. Then we will spend some time getting used to whatever powers they plan to give us. And the day afterwards, we will return and deal with those lunatics once and for all. XXX They were just standing in front of a futuristic version of a cinema, where a movie was being shown they had never heard of before. It was actually a historical film that played during the so-called cyberdroid crisis in the first half of the 21st century of this Earth. Before they had been declared full citizens, around 2159, the early androids and AIs had been trying to free themselves from the control of the government and the corrupted company that were creating them, that meant about 700 years ago. It was actually a romance story about a man who is working for the police forces and who finds out that the woman he had met and he has fallen in love with, is actually an android and was working for an AI resistance movement. Okay. Finding out that your girlfriend isn't human was definitely something Issei could perfectly relate to. As Issei had been told during his time here, it was actually secret intervention from the Guardians that had helped to keep a conflict from breaking out, while at the same time, the Lords and some of their agents had been trying to provoke the parties involved into an open war. It was one of many events from the history of their organization he had heard about during his first 2 weeks in this world. Back then, the existence of the Guardians and their enemies had not yet been known to the wide public. The movie mentioned their involvement only on the side. Still, he found it interesting and decided to invite his girls, and Murayama of course, to watch it. XXX. Issei-kun. Say, what do you think about Rias' offer? Irina asked him. It is a bit surprising, he admitted. But like she said, we can use any help we can get. And we have been working well with her before, right? As much as this devil get on my nerves sometimes, I have to agree, Raynor stated. Issei, I want to ask you something, Irina said. I want to spend some time with you, just you and me. The noticed the eyes of the others having turned to her. Look, it is not that I dislike you, she said to them. I actually care about you. I think we are going along great. For being a harem and all. But, it is not that I want to have Issei-kun just for myself, but I would like to at least for a few hours. Are you asking him out for a date? Murayama questioned. Yes I do, she replied. So can we. Of course Irina, Issei answered. If you want to, you and I can spend the rest of the evening together. After we have watched the movie together of course. Okay. She can have you for this evening, Raynor stated. But tomorrow, after our training ends, you will have another date with me. Don't worry, I won't even kill you this time. She grinned. Unless of course, you have developed a fetish for it and actually want me to. But then I would need someone at hand to bring you back. Raynor, how can you say something like that? Asia called out. Don't worry. He knows I am only joking. He knows I love him. Right, Issei-kun? She took one step closer to him and kissed him. I know, but I still hate it when you say it like that. Your sense of humor is sometimes simply evil, my dear, Issei said. It was a horrible thing to say. Raynor-sama, Asia repeated. Issei can always punish me later for being bad, the fallen angel said playfully. Would you like to help? Asia blushed. I guess you will want to go to a date too. Issei asked her. Why yes, she replied. Good, then I will spend the first part of tomorrow's evening with Raynor and the second with you. Okay. Yes. I want a date as well, Ravel now said firmly. You can have your turn after we return from this mission, Irina exclaimed. That means, if that is okay with you Issei, she asked him. Of course, he grinned. You know, I would never refuse a date with a cute girl, especially if it is one of you. XXXXXXX One other of the many alternate realities, a dark world, Kyoto, Japan. A large transport jet was landing in front of the giant sinister-looking palace, that was standing in the center of the city, that would in another world have been one of the cultural hearts of Japan. The town also played an important role in the history of this world. But the most glaring difference to most other realities was, the inhabitants of this town weren't human. They also weren't fallen angels or devils either. They were part of another race, similar, but quite different, and far older than the creatures generally known as the devils. The transport had just landed. It was a mix out of modern technology, augmented with magic. The locks of the vehicle opened, and a line of armed guards stepped outside, leading a group of shackled prisoners, slaves. The prisoners, members of the species that was in many other realities known as devils, their guards consisted of fallen angels and a number of human mages and bounty hunters. At the gates of the large palace-like estate, they were greeted by two heavily armed figures. They were both members of the demonic race that were ruling this town, and this part of the world. "I see you have brought the half-bloods His Majesty had requested," one of them said. "As Lord Dagan has ordered," the leader of the fallen angel group replied, trying to hide his distaste about all this. He was Barakwile, one of the leaders of the Grigori. He knew what was going to happen here and he didn't like it at all. But he had orders. "Good. Bring them inside," the guard said. The point where their history diverged so drastically from most others, was during the time of the Great War. But the actual roots of the events went far further back, during the beginning of the known history of the underworld. What very few people knew, eons ago the underworld was being ruled by another race of ancient demons, a race that, in this world, had returned and taken back that had once belonged to them. In the beginning, the realm known as the underworld was being populated by the ancient demons, who were often said to be descended from the oldest ones and ultimately from the darkness itself. There had also been other old races, like the angels of heaven, born from the light and from God, who opposed them. It was like that in the beginning, but soon things became more complex. The archangel Lucifer made an attempt to become equal or even greater than God, by forging a pact with the forces of darkness, and after starting a war in heaven itself, were banished from their realm. So the angel race itself became first tainted and the first fallen appeared. Lucifer had been the leader of the Satans, a heavenly accuser, who tested other creatures in the name of God, their faith and their convictions and their resistance to sin. Besides his brother Michael, he was the oldest and most powerful of the angels. He did his work faithfully, until the day he discovered the other dimensions and realities of the multiverse, and he realized that his creator, who he had thought was all-powerful, was in fact only a manifestation of an even greater force. And even more, he found out that there were beings in the cosmos, like Ophis, who actually surpassed his god. It was something he wouldn't accept. So he researched, explored, all for an attempt to actually reach and summon this higher force, the true form of God, like he called it. But in the end he no longer cared if it was truly the light of God that he contacted, or the darkness, and he was corrupted and consumed by the forces he had unleashed. At the same time, the human race had developed on Earth and spread over the planet. From all races God had created so far, they had the hardest access to supernatural powers and energies and were so often weaker than the others. But they were also the most independent and had the most free will. That awoke the interest of many of the supernatural-born species, angels and demons alike. While many humans searched God and so followed the one or the other religion, others instead dealt with the demons and many formed pacts with them for power. It however also came to relations of a completely different kind. Over time many humans and demons had intercourse with each other. Some even came into actual relationships and quite often produced offspring. One of the earliest and most known examples was the infamous Lilith, who later became the progenitor of the modern devil race, a human who made a demonic pact and was as a result transformed into a demonic being. Over a few centuries, these crossbreeds were becoming more and more and mixing into the population of the underworld. At the same time, however, they were mostly considered what would later be called second-class citizens. The positions of power were only be held by the old demons, while their part-human offspring were mostly servants and laborers. But at the same time, the demon lords were relying more and more on these servants, who often came from the lines of these half-bloods and on humans and other creature they had recruited. With other words, they had become soft, lazy and corrupt. Until finally it came to an uprising. Lilith, who had risen to one of the leaders and the spokeswoman of the Half-Bloods, formed an alliance with Lucifer and his exiled army, and together they waged war against the demons and took over the underworld. These events repeated themselves across several parallel realities in similar details. The surviving demons, being faced with total destruction, fled from their world into the dimensional void and were not seen again. The Half-Bloods, together with Lucifer's forces, meanwhile cemented their hold over the realm they had just conquered and built up a new society. They also took a new name and were calling themselves from that point on with the more modern term devils. Lucifer, whose angel wings had been lost through his enormous exposure to dark powers and replaced with demonic ones and was barely recognizable as an angel now, became one of the new rulers. His former angelic title of Satan was fused the titles Mao and Devil King. Soon the new rulers saw themselves as nobility and did not longer want to remember that they were not the original rulers of the underworld, and that they weren't the original demons. They just started to pretend that it had always been theirs, and after a few more centuries, all but the oldest ones had actually forgotten that it had ever been different. XXX The surviving demons, however, had encountered Ophis when they set foot in the dimensional void, who demanded them to leave her home, and after hearing their situation and that they couldn't return, had decided to send them to another, empty, dimension. So landed demons from various different parallel realities in a so far empty world and started to rebuild their civilization, and they never forgot. The demons realized their earlier mistakes and decided to completely reform their own society, to once again concentrate on the things that made them what they were. Things like compassion, tolerance for failure and weakness were being banned. They would never be weak again. They as well gave their race a new name. The Erebos demons, the children of the dark, and they swore eternal revenge on their enemies, the pretenders, who had cast them out. They cultivated both their power and their hatred and built up new armies and resources, until they were even stronger than they had been before. As, after some more centuries, they were ready to leave the world they had been exiled to and return to eradicate their old enemies, they discovered that their old home realities had by now splintered into hundreds of new timelines and universes, and in all of them, the underworld was being ruled by the devils. So they found out that their self-given task to destroy them all was far harder than they had expected. But they also found something else: opportunities. As they scouted the various worlds, they found out that in many of them the devils were at war, not only with heaven, but also with a new breed of fallen angels. The Great War, as they called it. The Erebos demons chose one of this worlds, one that seemed promising, and decided to intervene in this war. In an ironic reversal of history, they contacted at the time hard-pressed fallen angels, who had the lowest population of the three factions of the war, and offered an alliance. It was an offer they could hardly refuse. Within just a few weeks the war was turned around completely in their favor. The new alliance conquered not only the underworld, but also parts of the earth. The forces of heaven were being pushed back, and now it was the devils who faced complete extinction, by an enemy who knew absolutely no mercy, especially if it came to them. And in another ironic twist, it was their enemies, the fallen angels, who held their new allies back and saved the devils from being completely annihilated. Whatever animosities they had with them, it could not even compare to the unlimited hatred the Erebos felt for their, as they called it, degenerated offshoots. The demons, however, knew that they still had some uses for the fallen angels and decided to stay their hands, at least for the moment. But for many of the conquered devils, life became soon worse than death. XXXXXXX Today, as they walked through the corridors of the building, two slave girls, dressed in maid outfits, opened the doors to the main hall. They were both young-looking and very attractive, and their clothes were cut to show this off. One had brown hair and the other deep red. Just like the prisoners, they were half-blood demons, or, like they were calling themselves, devils. Both of the girls were frightened to the bones, but they did everything they could to not show it. They knew what was about to happen to their kind that was just being brought inside. They had already witnessed this 2 times. In other realities, they would have been princesses of the Grimoire and the Baal clan. But here they were nothing. Their names were Rias and Venelana Grimoire. The only reason they were allowed to be here, or even to live, was to take care of the tasks in the house and of the needs of their master, the governor of this town, and for his personal pleasure. Of course, sexual relations to half-bloods of any sort were not exactly gladly seen. But they happened nonetheless. Still, Today a person was here who the two female devils feared even more than their master. The guards now led the group of prisoners through the hall and before the throne. The fallen angels bowed respectfully and the two demons kneeled before the person sitting on it, Dagan, current Mao and Emperor of the Erebos demons. Similar to the devils, however, he was not the first bearer of this name, but one of his descendants. It was said that his bloodline went back to the legendary Old Ones themselves. Standing next to him was the governor and the actual owner of this castle. But for the moment the emperor was on a visit and had decided to make this place his temporary residence. Pazuzu has contacted us and informed us that he had eliminated another universe and a possible target, he informed his ruler. Has he? Well, I am sure he will explain the reasons for his decision for us in detail when he returns, Dagan replied casually. There are many other possible worlds out there that can be chosen. Don't worry about it. If our work here is a success, we will soon not to have to worry about picking promising targets anymore. Our enemies will meet destruction wherever they are. My lord, the new group of subjects that you had requested have arrived, one of the kneeling guards said to him. Barakiel, he greeted the leader of the small group of fallen, it is good to see you again. Yes, Lord Dagan, I feel the same way, he replied. Despite what he said, he did not truly mean it. Over time, many of the fallen angels came to see more and more that they were actually the junior partners in this alliance they had agreed to, and that their allies, given the circumstances, could just as easily turn against them, when against the other powers. Bring the half-bloods in the center of the room, and then leave them, Dagan announced. The ritual is about to begin. This was only one of the other reasons why Barakiel and many of the others of the fallen came to distrust the Erebos, this deal Dagan had made with some sort of malicious alien creature a few weeks ago. The frightened devils, 13 altogether, were being left alone. But only for a few moments. Then something manifested itself in the room between them and their captors. It had the form of a bizarrely glowing mist of energy, that was slowly surrounding them. Then it began. It happened in a matter of only a few seconds. The incorporeal glowing mass was, for a moment, taking a humanoid shape, and at the same time, the bodies of the assembled slaves started to dissolve in a horrible process. Their skin was drying out and falling apart. Their flesh was starting to burn and literally being ripped from their bodies, as at the same time their life energy was being sucked out of their bodies and being absorbed by the monster that had just manifested itself. For a few moments, the entire room was filled with terrible screams. Then, seconds later, it was over. All that was left of the prisoners were burned up blackened skeletons and ash. Venelana and Rias had also been watching the entire process in complete horror. They also both knew, if it were not for the fondness their master had for them, as much as they hated it, they would have probably also been sacrificed like that. It was a full success, Dagan, however, declared, as he saw that the glowing of the formless creature before him has intensified. Our honored guest is satisfied, for the moment. He smiled. Thank you Barakiel, that was everything, he addressed him and his team, who bowed quickly and were leaving the room. One of the fallen angels, a dark-haired young woman, had a frown on her face and sent a dark, barely visible, look back to the room and what she and the others had just witnessed here. Her name was Akeno Himahima and she was, in fact, Barakiel's daughter, together with a human woman, and she shared a similar mindset about all this as he did. After a short moment, she followed her father outside. XXX. A few minutes later, Dagan ordered the others out of the room as well and he was left alone with only one other being. Lord Galad, he said, have you been satisfied with the sacrifice for this day? Yes my friend, I am, a bodiless voice answered him from the seemingly empty room. Dagan remembered how he had discovered the being who had entered their dimension a few months ago, and especially as he had found out who exactly this creature was, and that he was willing to agree to a deal. He remembered how the being had told him how it had traveled between the stars and through different universes for many years, searching for a way to restore itself. But I need more, the creature said. If I shall restore my old power I need more energy, more lives, far more. You will get them, Dagan declared. I don't care how many of these filthy half-bloods I have to sacrifice. As long as you fulfill our agreement. You don't have to worry, the formless being answered, I remember my promise. And besides that, you know I cannot do it without you. As soon as, with your help, I will take a new physical form, as soon as I am back to what I once have been, we will share this power. You and I will be one, and your enemies, our enemies, in all universes, will be destroyed. Guardian. Home dimension. London. Issei and Irina were currently sitting together inside a version of a cafe of this future world. This was their date that they had agreed to. Tomorrow he would then meet with Raynor and Asia. All in all, he had to say things were good, despite the situation they were all in. In 2 days, they would return to the last universe and to battle, when they were ready. For the moment, however, he and his girls had some time for themselves. They had found this cafe by some luck. Its interior was designed in a mixed style of "modern" and some "ancient" elements. Ancient meant, in this case, like in the 21st century, where they both actually came from, their own present time. It was kind of funny, especially seeing the details that the people of this century got wrong. Of course, this was not their home universe. So they couldn't be completely sure if these things were truly wrong, or if the 21st century fashion had just been a bit different in this world as it had been in their own. But it was still fun. Issei admitted he had seen and learned about a lot of crazy stuff in the time he had spent in this dimension here. Besides the other 2 greater conflicts between the Guardians and the Dark Order in this universe, that involved entire galaxies. Entire worlds that had been invaded by vampires or zombies and in a few cases overrun. Civilizations of living artificial lifeforms, androids, cyborg creatures, and intelligent living robots, some of which were older than mankind. One of them who had been at a civil war with each other for millions of years, until the 2 sides had to team up to defeat an ancient chaos god, who was older than the universe and threatened to destroy it. Genetic mutations that turned normal humans into powerful super beings that in some cases even rivaled a Mao, and a few times even surpassed them. Open and also secret alien invasions on Earth and on different planets, and And of course, the possibility for a mortal being to grow into a cosmic entity, to surpass the gods like some of the Guardians and their enemies have actually done it. Yes, he had heard of and done many on the first look bizarre things. This here on the other side was only a little fun, for both of them. Irina was sitting smiling next to him. They had just been ordered hamburgers for both of them and were listening to some songs that were being played. Some of them they knew, while others were completely unknown to them since they had never been written in their world. But it didn't really matter. They both had fun. Tomorrow he would spend the same time with Asia and then with Raynor. This short good time, they all knew, would, however, end in 2 days, when they would return to the world of their last fight. A song was beginning to play from the nostalgic-looking music box, standing in the corner of the room. He had been asking and knew that it was actually a highly advanced playing device, that was only made up to look like an old-style player from the 20th century. He had to grin as he heard the title of the song. It was named Best Friend, from some ancient author, whose announcer on the tape said, had nearly been forgotten over time. What do you think? He asked Irina. This song is somehow really fitting for the 2 of us, right? She had to laugh a little. Sure it is, Issei-kun. You know I am truly happy to be sitting here and spending some time with my best friend, once again. It is nearly like back when we were playing together as children. Except of course for the part where you are fucking mine, Raynor's and Asia's brains out, she whispered to him suggestively. But of course I like that parts too. He only grinned at her. Okay, she said a bit flustered. I like this parts especially much, she admitted blushing. Guardian HQ. The next morning the present versions of Issei, Raynor, Asia, Rias and Akeno, and also Issei's exorcist double, were standing in a line in front of their counterparts from the future timeline. The other members of their teams were assembled in a circle around them. Also standing close to them was Odin, who was so far watching the entire exchange. Flashback. A short time ago he and Issei had a short talk about Rias' request to join the Guardians, or more specifically Issei's and Gariel's subgroup. They knew that most of the more experienced members of their organization distrusted and disliked the Devils. For good reasons, as they both admitted. The attempt of Rias's brother and Seraphal to blackmail them into allowing them to visit their base was only one of the latest of many examples. Still Rias, in the last months, had turned out to be quite cooperative and honest with them so far. The great exception, of course, being her attempt to intentionally let Raynor kill him, to turn him into her servant. Something that her older counterpart from the other timeline had actually succeeded in, as he had heard, besides others, equally or even more nasty things. And still his older self had forgiven her for everything, and she was one of his lovers. Rias and him. It was nearly a strange thought. If he was honest, he had always tried to keep a bit of a distance to her since that day, given the stance that most of the Guardians had regarding devils, not to mention the fact that she had literally set him up to die. But if he could forgive Raynor, why not her? But now, when she had actually offered to join his team, Darian and the other leaders have decided to give her and the others a chance, Odin had told him, given that you and her group had been working together quite well in these last few months. And that she actually seems genuine in her offer, he stated. Of course they won't be completely trusted in the beginning, similar to like the fallen angels Calawarner and Donasek were. As you remember, they had only been taught key manipulation and some other basic techniques in the beginning, while you and Raynor actually got some more advanced training. Yes, I remember. So do they intend to have Rias and the others also be beaten up by a few humans? Issei asked him sardonically. Odin started to laugh. Maybe they will. I have not asked them about it yet, he replied, chuckling. XXXXXXX flashback. But now he was standing in front of his two counterparts, waiting to begin with whatever sort of power-up the oldest of the three Isseis had in mind. Are you ready? The older Issei asked them. We are, Issei answered. What exactly do you want to do now? Rias questioned their older counterparts a bit nervously. To put it simply, we will share our powers with each other, future Issei stated. In our case Issei, he addressed his other self, your friend Odin will assist us a little bit. There is something I am intending in that. Is it dangerous? Issei asked him. No, not really. At least not with Odin being there with us. But it might be a bit, well, stressful, for both of us. I am not sure I like the sound of this, Issei responded. You will see. But now let us begin, he said to the others. They, that meant the three Isseis, together with Odin, and the two Raynors, Rias and Akenos, separated from the rest of the group. Each one of them was following their older counterpart and was finally, alone with themselves. XXX the three Isseis were looking at each other. So what exactly do you want to do to help us? Present Issei asked his future counterpart. That is the question, his older self answered. First I will, of course, try to use telepathy to transfer knowledge of some of my techniques into your minds. The others will probably do the same. That is the easy part, he commented. But that is not everything. In the time since I had first activated the boosted gear, I have achieved an incredible level of power, he stated. Much of it, however, I had not reached through training of better control, it was given to me by others, he admitted. I have for example received powers from Ophis, and from Great Red, he stated. Well, to be honest, in the case of Great Red, I have not simply been given power, the truth is, I have been dying. I had been poisoned with Samael's blood. I guess you both had heard about him. The two other Isseis nodded. They both knew about the cursed former angel. I was technically already dead. Again, he added with some sarcasm. My body had been destroyed. But Great Red, he thought that I was still needed, and he brought me back. He restored my body, with his own flesh. Since then I am practically a hybrid between a dragon, a devil, and a human. That is the reason your aura feels so much more draconic than ours, Exorcist Issei concluded surprised. Yes, future Issei replied. And what I want is to share this flesh with you, he stated. What? His two counterparts called out, nearly at the same time. Moment. We don't swing that way, Present Issei replied, as you should know since you are, well, us. Neither do I, future Issei called out, more than a bit irritated, as you should see from my harem. I mean that literally, of course. I want, with Odin's help, to transfer some of Great Red's cells from me to you and in turn replace them with your human ones. It would only be a small part of my body and not affect my own power level. But for you, it would make you stronger. It would not be that much, but it would give you access to some draconic powers, in addition to the strength you already possess. You would technically be part dragon. And it would also allow you to channel Ddrag's power better through your bodies. I see, Present Issei replied. But we would no longer be completely human, he stated. But on the other side, if it makes us stronger. No, you wouldn't be, he replied. I guess this might mean more to you than it would to me. I haven't been human anymore for a long time after all, future Issei mentioned. Do it, Present Issei replied. I have agreed to this job and I won't let anyone else die in front of me again. He remembered what happened to Murayama and what could have happened to Asia if Gariel had not changed Raynor's mind back then, and all the other times someone he knew was in danger. I am sorry, but I must decline, their exorcist counterpart told them. I am human and I intend to stay it. I know this would be an advantage for the moment. But in the long run, it would undermine everything I want to reach. My goal is to prove to everyone that humans are a race that can stand on its own and is worthy to be respected by the supernatural. If I used part of a dragon's body to strengthen myself, it would only make me look like a hypocrite. Even having the boosted gear pushes it sometimes. But at least the sacred gears were actually designed for humans and I didn't exactly have a choice as I have been given it. Besides that, I truly believe that humans can also by themselves become pretty powerful if they have the right kind of potential and training, of course. I see, future Issei said, I understand. I will respect your choice. Believe me, if you want to train, this is exactly the right place, Present Issei commented. Sadly, we are still in a kind of hurry. By the way, future Issei mentioned, you know that you have another source of power inside you, beside the boosted gear and your skill. He turned to his exorcist counterpart. Yes, I sensed it as well, Present Issei said. It is nearly like some kind of spirit that is bounded to you. I know. I often draw strength from it. It is a strange story, but years ago I met an old man in a park. I told him about my dream to become a hero, and he gave me this. He took out a strange-looking card. He said something that he called a heroic spirit, the spirit of some long-dead hero, was bounded to it and it would help me in the future. At first, I thought he was just some kind of weirdo. But later, as I became a holy sword wielder, I saw that it truly gave me some kind of extra power and I could feel the presence of the spirit. Believe me, I have actually heard far stranger stories than that, Present Issei told him. What neither of them knew. The old man in question was actually Zelrech, who had just spotted a new candidate, for whatever his plans were. The same with me, future Issei responded. You know, I have also met an old guy in a park once. He had told me about the beauty of breasts and to always appreciate them. Yes, the same with me, Present Issei said. I guess that explains a lot about you too, their exorcist counterpart remarked. Okay, Present Issei stated. We might be perverts, but that doesn't mean that we can't be serious when we should be. He turned to future Issei and Odin. Can we begin with it? In one moment, future Issei replied. There is also another ability that I and the others wanted to share with you. But this one I can only give to you, he said, looking at present Issei, not at their exorcist self. It involves you, Raynor, and Rias Grimoire. A minute later future Issei activated his boosted gear and Odin his magic, and together they began the process to transfer some of his cells from his body to his younger counterpart and back. XXX Raynor and Raynor the fallen angel was thinking about all what she heard in the last few days. She knew it was very likely that herself in the last reality they had visited had killed the Asia of her world by taking the Twilight healing. Just like she had originally planned it, if Gariel had not stopped her. Just like the older version of her, who was here, had actually gone through with her plan. But in her case, Asia had been reincarnated as a devil very quickly. For this other Asia, however, there had probably been no way back to life. She wasn't quite sure how to feel about this. Over the last few months, she had come to see Asia, not only as another one of Issei's lovers, but also as a close friend. The thought that she had been so easily willing to kill her, as if she had been nothing but a tool, just a few months ago, made her nearly sick. Right now she was standing in front of the slightly older, and as she admitted far more powerful, version of herself. Finally, only you and me, or should I say me and myself. Future Raynor declared, smiling. I have heard this fallen angel Gariel had convinced you to spare Asia. Yes. Good. Then you avoided one of the things I regret most. I admit over time this small nun became something like a friend to me, she stated. Same with me, she responded. Actually, I admit she is one of my best friends by now. Irony of fate, I would say, Future Raynor commented. Of course Gariel did have a second agenda with that and kept me in the dark until later. She truly is a manipulative bitch. But I guess we are not the one to talk here, right, me? The older Raynor chuckled a bit. I have not known the Gariel from our world well. In fact, I have only met her once. But believe me, by all what I have seen so far, yours is a giant improvement. Enough of the small talk. If I want to talk to myself, I can just do it in my room, looking into a mirror. What exactly do you want to do? Raynor finally asked. You said you want to help me to get stronger. So do it, instead of asking stupid questions. Just the reply I expected from me, Future Raynor grinned. Okay. Let me explain. Aside from normal training, and you can, believe me, I did a lot of that. My new power mostly comes from two sources and I intend to share one of them with you. Only one? Present Raynor questioned. I am talking about the power from Ddrag that I had absorbed during the months I had been bodiless and my soul bonded to Issei-kun's. You should know, his energy has the nature to practically refill itself. This is also related to his ability to boost. So if I give you a certain amount of it, my own strength will just recover in the next 1 or 2 days. Yours, however, will grow. Sounds good, Present Raynor replied. The other source of power is a small spark of Ariman's presence, that was a side effect of my resurrection. You realize why it would be a bad idea to share this with you? She asked rhetorically. Of course I want something in return. The Phoenix ability you have bounded to the Twilight Healing, you will share it with me, she requested. Just like my dragon power, the Phoenix Fire is able to regenerate itself. So if we both take a short recovery afterwards, neither of us will lose anything, but we will both win. Believe me, if we do this right, we will both come out stronger than we are now, Future Raynor explained. Great. There is however also something else you might find interesting, her older counterpart added. But for the beginning, let me give you some of my knowledge. The younger Raynor felt the mental powers of her other self reaching out to her and her mind was flooded with knowledge. About parts of the training her counterpart had under Fost, about how to integrate the absorbed dragon powers into her own and to properly use them and about some techniques she had developed. And also about a certain detail that involves her, Issei and a certain red-haired devil. XXX Rias and Rias, finally alone, Future Rias announced to her counterpart as they had reached some distance to the others. So you are the me from this universe. Now, why don't you tell me a few things about you? What do you mean? We have already spoken to each other, Present Rias replied. Yes, but never alone, she responded. And we both know that we always kept up a facade with others. Always acting nice, she said. While in truth we are screwing with everyone around us, even our friends, especially our friends actually. Always trying to take advantage of others for our own end. Like the time when I had allowed Issei to be killed. Among many other things like that, and worse. You know what I am talking about, right? Present Rias grimaced for a short moment. Yes, she replied bitterly. I do. Yes, she knew what the other her was talking about. She also remembered some of the hard lessons she had learned in the last few months. You know, I have been talking with the others here about you, Future Rias stated. By what I am heard, you are already different from the spoiled, selfish, corrupt devil I myself have been in this time. To be honest, that is actually the only reason I am even considering to actually help you to get stronger. What in the world had happened to you? The younger Rias asked irritated. Why are you talking about yourself like this? What exactly is your problem? What do you think? She retorted. I was doing what we always do. Taking advantage of everyone around us, while pretending to be their best friend. Until it all came back, blowing into my face. Even mommy, and daddy, couldn't protect me anymore from the consequences of the shit I have done. And I lost everything, my position, my status, my peerage. All through my own fault, she admitted. You know, if you were exactly like my old self, I would certainly consider just blowing you away and deal with everything else later, she said. Not that it would matter much. One conniving devil less, she shrugged with her shoulders. Oni-chan would probably be devastated, I guess. But he would get over it. Your servants would probably be sad, cry a little and then realize that you never did anything for them in the first place and then move on. The same for your parents. They would then make Milikas their new heir, at least until they had fucked around enough to produce a new child to replace you. Shut up. Present Rias yelled. You are a Satan-damned bitch. I get it. Okay. You have fucked up your life and hate yourself now. And I had been on the same way until things changed. But that doesn't mean you have to treat me like this because of it. I guarantee you one thing, I won't end up like you did. So shut up. Good. Good. Future Rias answered, now smirking. Maybe you have actually learned your lesson faster than I had. Of course, it is the question if you will back up your words with actions. But I guess we will just have to give you a chance, right? Then let us begin, she said. Like Raynor did, she felt her own mental powers reaching out to her. XXX Akeno and Akeno, what did you say? Present Akeno asked her older self. I said I have nothing to give you, future Akeno replied. Accept these words. Stop acting like a spoiled selfish brat, she declared. What do you mean? She asked nervously. You know exactly what I mean. I am not able to give you any more power, but I don't need to. You already possess more. The ones you inherited from our father. You just refused to use them for your own petty reasons. Petty. Present Akeno called out angrily. How can you say that? You don't know. She could barely believe what her double had just said. Don't be an idiot. I am you, future Akeno replied. Of course I know. I have gone through exactly the same shit like you. And I know how pathetic I have been, future Akeno declared. I lost my mother. She was taken from me by a bunch of murderers. Yes, that is terrible. Yes, that should have never happened. But then I decided to blame my father for something he had no control over. Barakwile had left mother to die, Present Akeno shouted at her. He did nothing to help her. Are you an idiot? Future Akeno asked her. Her voice was cold like ice, showing absolutely no sympathy for her younger counterpart. The ones who killed her were her own family. They had been intentionally waiting for a time mother was alone at home, she explained. He should have been there, Present Akeno exclaimed. He should have protected us. What are you for? Had your father to be around you all the time to protect you? You perfectly know that this is impossible. Even if he had been there at that time, the Himahimas would have just waited for another chance to catch her alone. He had never helped me afterwards. He just left me alone, Present Akeno called out, now visibly distraught. You disappeared after the attack, older Akeno reminded her. He didn't even know where we were. He would have probably found us again and helped us, if we hadn't run into Rias first, future Akeno countered. But not only that, we then decided to use this as an excuse to hate all the other fallen angels, even if they had nothing to do with what happened. It is only because of them. The younger Akeno said, though not really sounding as if she believed her own words. She materialized her wings, one devil and one fallen angel wing. These wings, she said, this damned wings, it is only because of this that they killed mother in the first place. She was sobbing now. Do you even realize that is exactly what her murderers would have said to justify themselves? Older Akeno asked sharply. She was involved with a fallen angel, so they killed her. She materialized her own wings and then transformed into her 8-winged fallen angel form. During that her clothes also changed into a very revealing leather strap outfit, that rivaled Raynor's and showed off her large breasts and her ass to the world. This would have brought a smirk on the younger Akeno's face, if it were not for the painful topic of their conversation. Do you really think that was a reason to slaughter your own family? Future Akeno yelled angrily. Her younger counterpart flinched painfully as she heard this words. They didn't kill her because of the wings. They did it because they were a bunch of bigoted and self-righteous murderous assholes, who expected her to live her life only like they wanted her to do. And nothing else, she said. Funny, how you hate our father for not helping when he wasn't even there, but you willingly serve Rias, who was threatening to leave you to die, if you didn't accept conditions that were bordering to slavery, when she was standing right in front of you. How was that? You couldn't leave devil territory. You couldn't leave Rias' side. The backquote deal she made with the Himahimas had turned you into a prisoner. She had practically made you a servant long before you accepted the evil pieces, without even telling you. But Rias isn't a fallen angel, so it is okay, right? What? Did you think I would feel all sorry for you because you lost your mommy? I know better than anybody that it would be a waste. You Akeno Himahima are a bigot and a hypocrite. I would know it. I am you after all. Why should I even consider helping someone like you? Face it, you don't hate fallen angels because they are somehow to blame for mother's death or for what happened to you. You do it because they are an easy target for your anger. They are nothing but a convenient scapegoat for a hurt little girl. Akeno now cringed even more at this. But that isn't even the real problem, future Akeno continued. No matter who is at fault for mother's death or what happened to you, it doesn't excuse you not using your full power in battle, just because of your own issues. Especially if the lives of your friends could depend on it. Do you want Rias, Kaneko, Yuto or maybe Issei, Asia, Irina or Xenovia to die, just because you refuse to use part of your powers? No. Present Akeno admitted. Good. Then get your head out of your ass and start using them, her older self told her. Look at me, she ordered. This is what we are. She gestured to her black wings. We are just as much a fallen angel, as we are a devil or human. This won't change, no matter how many evil pieces Rias puts inside you. Akeno nodded. A second later she grinned. Wow. You have really put me through the ringer here, she finally commented with a sly smirk. What did you expect? We are a sadomasochist after all, future Akeno replied. And I knew that you are so stubborn that this was the only thing that would go through to you. I don't hate them, Present Akeno stated meekly. The fallen angels. Not all of them. In the last months, we have worked with some of them. We have even been living with them. Gariel, Raynor, Calawarner, I cannot hate them. It is just. Father, and what happened? You are right. I am just fucking stubborn. So it seems that there is still hope for you, future Akeno replied. Like I said, I can't simply hand you some extra powers, like Issei or Raynor. But at least I can give you the knowledge how to use this form here. If you are ready to accept it. XXXXXXX Rias, a mind link, Present Rias questioned. Well, that is a pretty simple way to call it, her older self stated. It is a connection between all three of us. Ironically, it began as I killed Raynor, or better said as I tried to. Ultimately I did not much more than destroying a body, without actually ending her. She bounded her soul to Issei to survive. And later this damned curse from Loki connected Issei and me too, she explained. Well, but over time, we have actually learned to use it to our advantage. We are now able to share our power, to some degree at least. Sense each other's presence over great distances, and under certain conditions, we can even use each other's powers. And you want Issei, Raynor and me to become like that too? Present Rias asked. Like I said, it has its advantages, her older counterpart replied. You don't have to agree. But we think we could copy it, create a similar connection for you. Well, maybe it doesn't have to be between the same people. It could be useful, especially if you are out there on missions with Issei. This is your choice. But believe me, this connection had saved my life more than once. And it also saved a few things that have actual worth too, she said with some bitter sarcasm. Well, are you ready to learn something? She asked. XXXXXXX another universe. In the world where Issei and his team had been only a short time before, their enemies were continuing with their plans. The three Shah soldiers who had just undergone a procedure to change their entire genetic makeup, were now, inside the command center of their ship, standing in front of their commander. Next, to the chair Karen was sitting on, was their temporary ally Cao Cao standing. The three soldiers gave their leader a salute, by raising their arms and moving their fist against their chest, and then materialized their new wings, devil wings. They now also possessed the same demonic energy like real devils. Technically they were devils, at least genetically. The only thing they had left out was the typical weakness to light and holy energy. This could have possibly also been replicated with some effort, but it went against the Dark Orders and the Shah's philosophy to intentionally create weaknesses. I see the process was a complete success, Karen stated. Good. Yes, A quite impressive transformation, Cao Cao stated. Tell me, what exactly do you hope to achieve with this again? I have already explained the plan to you, Karen replied. Yes, but not every detail. Cao Cao admitted he was feigning a bit of ignorance here. Of course, he and his crew knew the entire plan Karen had proposed. But he was also testing his ally here a bit. It was not as if he was actually trusting this creature in any way. The Shah might claim to be simply some advanced kind of human. But in a way, they were as alien as they could get. The way these three here were so ready to agree to sacrifice themselves for what they called the cause, only showed it. Should Karen be holding back details from him? However, this was a small way of gloating him into revealing more than he wanted. Of course, he didn't actually expect the Shah commander to fall for it, but the attempt couldn't hurt. As you wish, Karen replied. Our operation is now beginning, he said to the morphed soldiers in front of them. Your target is the town of Kuo that is secretly a stronghold for the race known as the Devils. Your orders are simple. Cause as much destruction as possible. Kill whoever crosses your path, be it human or devil. And let yourself be seen doing it, he said. Our own probes will also record the events, and later it will be broadcasted over the entire planet. The existence of the supernatural will with this be revealed to the humanity of this world, he continued. Then we will step in. We will stop your attack and kill you, along with all the real devils in Kuo. Afterwards we will stage more attacks. So long till the humans realize once and for all that the supernatural races are real and a threat to them. Then we offer our assistance to the government and the churches of this world to fight them. This will be the beginning of a war between the human race and the supernatural on this planet, he explained. A war that the humans will win with our help. With our help, this humanity will then grow into the powerful race it was always meant to be. And they will be ready to be formed into a worthy ally of the Dark Order in their struggle over the multiverse. But that, as far as it came to him, Cao Cao didn't need to know. And if they didn't prove themselves worthy, then destruction was their natural fate. You three have the duty to die for our cause, Karen addressed the soldiers. Yes, Commander, they answered without any real hesitation. I admit, this could actually work, Cao Cao commented, if you pull this off right. Don't worry, the arrogance and complicity of the supernatural races will play right into our hands. They will never see it coming until it is too late. Of course, it will be necessary to sacrifice probably a few thousand humans. But they will be necessary sacrifices to a new world. As long as they serve to open the eyes of the people for the threat that is right among them, Cao Cao stated, I agree. They will. We will make sure of that. Maybe you want to join the next attack to wipe out the devils, my friend. You are a hero after all, Karen remarked. XXXXXXX Guardian. Home dimension. They were ready. For 3 days, at least in this dimension, they had been preparing themselves and now they would return. The evening had Issei of course spent with his girls. His team was standing together with their exorcist counterparts. But their group had now also grown by 3 people, Rias, Akeno and Kiba. While it was originally only Rias, who had asked to join Issei's team, the other 2 had requested to join as well, to back her up. They admitted some of the things future Rias and the others had said to them, had shaken their trust in her a bit. But, besides being their master, they still considered Rias a friend. Is Kaneko not with you? Issei had asked them. Kaneko said she would have liked to join us, Kiba said, but she. The 2 Kanekos and Kuroka wanted to find the Kuroka of our world and reunite them, Rias stated. So I let her go with them. Kaneko can join us later if she wants that. It is her decision. Rias. Akeno questioned. As you probably know, I have been given a lot to think about during the last weeks. I want you to be my friends and teammates, and not my servants. If one of you wants to leave me, they are free to go. I would tell the Mao and clan heads that you have my permission. To their surprise, 3 more people joined them. It was the Issei, Raynor and Akeno from the future timeline. We will come with you as well, future Issei said. You? Irina asked surprised. We are quite powerful as you know, and we are the only ones of us who already have experience with the hero faction. So it only makes sense that a few of us come with you. Rias has already taken over your Rias place in Kuo and the others are already beginning to plan the transfer of the rest of our people to your universe. We were actually meant to help with the organization as well, future Akeno stated. But we decided that for now, we should better give you a hand. We want to prevent the same thing to happen in this other universe, what happened in ours. A few of the others wanted to come as well, future Raynor told them. But there is still a lot of work to do with the evacuation of the rest of our people. Well, if we are completely honest, we just used this here as an excuse to escape the boring administration work, she joked. Future Akeno giggled at her command. Then, if you are all ready, let's go, Gariel announced. She opened another portal and they returned to the universe where they had fled from a short time ago. XXXXXXX they arrived once again, very close to the crashed spaceship. As soon as they arrived, Issei saw something he didn't like at all. Activity at the enemy base had definitely gone up. Nearly 24 of these Shah warriors were now standing around the entrance of their ship. And they noticed them nearly right after their arrival. The battle had started less than a minute after they had materialized themselves in this world. The rest of the crew was now leaving the ship and charging in their direction, either running or flying through the air with superpowers. All three Isseis activated their balance breakers, that were all somewhat different, given the different development of their powers. While the exorcist under them also draw his holy blade, like Irina and Zenobia, he was carrying one of the Excalibur fragments. The two Raynor materialized their wings, the older one 10 and the younger 6. The same did Gariel, Calawarner and the Akenos. The Irinas, Kibas and Zenovias draw their swords. Issei himself, however, materialized only a partial scale armor around his arms, for the moment. But he also used his other main weapon. This was only the second time he used the full potential of the Sword of Kronos in an actual battle. He watched how it morphed in his hand, from his usual appearance as a blade, into the form of a scythe. Like he had been told, this weapon had been forged from the sickle that had once belonged to the god Kronos, the Lord of Time, and it showed in the powers it possessed. He had actually become more powerful, Issei realized. He activated the weapon, and instantly, in a circle of 30 meters around him, dozens of Shah warriors who had been attacking them stopped moving. They were frozen in time. But not all of the enemies were affected. Some were simply too powerful to be stopped by the effect of the scythe. Two of them were Karen and Cao Cao, who had now also joined the battle. The battle had begun. Issei was holding a few of the opponents at bay by freezing them in time. This of course didn't work with all of their opponents, either because their own powers were able to counter the effect of Issei's power, or because they were simply too powerful, and wasn't able to do this for very long. At least not yet. He simply unleashed a large wave of energy all around him that blew the Shah soldiers from their feet, in the moment he released them from his powers. His teammates Irina, Zenobia, Kiba and Akeno took advantage of that. They charged and forced the downed enemies to draw back. Two of the ones who were too powerful to be affected by Issei's frozen time bubble, were of course Kiran and Cao Cao, the two enemy leaders. Both of them would never be stopped so easily, and they now had turned their attention on them. After the last short clash with their troops, they didn't seem all that surprised to see them again, with reinforcements this time. The very fact that there were more than one versions of the same person, was something that unsettled at least Cao Cao. Now there are already 3 versions of the Red Dragon Emperor, he stated. One of them is now even a devil. Multiple worlds. Indeed. It would nearly be funny if it didn't cause so much trouble for us, he commented. It seems my suspicions were true. This group must be agents of our enemies, Karen responded. No doubt they are here to interfere with our plans. They need to be taken out. This one, he pointed to Issei. He is the same one who led the "rescue mission" a few hours ago. And it seems he has a limited power over space and time. In response, Cao Cao only grinned. You mean that he is our next major target for the moment, right? He replied. Good. He materialized his sacred gear, the Spear of Longinus, and joined the battle. XXX It were however not only Issei's physical powers that had increased drastically. His mental ones had as well. His supernatural senses were literally sweeping the entire country. He could see outbreaks of magical energy over thousands of miles distance. He sensed that this here was not the only place in Japan where supernatural creatures were fighting. In fact, he could feel that right now another clash was going on, and that was nowhere else than in his hometown. It seemed the Shah and their allies had chosen Kuo as their target. Yes, this would make sense, since it was the greatest devil stronghold in the country. Or was this just coincidence and someone else just happened to attack the town right now? Unlikely. Raynor, Gariel, something is happening back in Kuo, he called out. Do you sense it? They are attacking the city. Yes, I do, Raynor replied. But I fear we have our own hands a bit full here, she remarked. She, Rias and her two peerage members, Calawarner, Issei's and Irina's exorcist counterparts and the two Xenovia's and Kiba's counterpart Isaiah were being swarmed from all sides by Shah soldiers. Some of their opponents were not that far above skilled exorcists or other specially trained humans, others however had strong and dangerous powers. Future Raynor, Irina and future Akeno were meanwhile being attacked by Cao Cao's group of powerful sacred gear wielders. But this was not their only problem. Karen himself had joined the fight. The Shah leader now showed power that at least rivaled an ultimate class being. He fired two energy blasts from his hands that nearly hit Rias and Xenovia, who were barely able to dodge. But the explosions as the attack hit the ground was still enough to throw them from their feet. Rias, to her luck, seemed to have gotten out of it with only a few scratched. But Akeno was left with visible injuries. Not bad enough to threaten her life. Hopefully, but enough to take her out of the fight. Future Raynor, who was still fighting the members of the hero factions, was using her own version of the Twilight Healing, a power copied from the energy still residing inside her, when her body had originally been destroyed, and healed Akeno's injuries. XXX Asia herself had ultimately decided to stay behind. While she had taken serious lessons in self-defense and physical combat in the last few months, they all knew that she was not ready for an open battle of this scale yet. At least not without someone guarding her. But this was something they couldn't pull any real effort against this many powerful enemies. And since the two Raynors possessed Twilight Healing as well, they had agreed that it was safer this way. Even if none of them truly liked it to leave her behind like this. As they were fighting, the area around them was quickly being turned into a blazing inferno. Stray blasts from both sides left large smoking craters on the ground and the forest around them had been set on fire. Alone the crashed spaceship was being protected by its energy shields. One of the Shah soldiers ran forward, his hands were glowing with deadly energy. No doubt he was trying to blast them. But before he had the chance, Rias hit him with her power of destruction and he was annihilated. Yes, right now, none of them could deny that leaving Asia out of this massacre here had probably been a good idea. She wasn't ready for this, not yet. XXX Karen however was no longer paying much attention to them and he instead looked at future Issei and his group. He admitted he had a bad feeling about this. He quickly realized that he shouldn't have only worried about the Red Dragon Emperor with the time manipulation power, but even more about this three. XXX at this moment Cao himself appeared before Issei, with his spear drawn and ready to strike. Issei instantly raised his own weapon to defend himself. But it never came to this. Before the leader of the hero faction had fully reached him and the spear and the sword of Kronos connected, future Issei, in his full-scale armor, interfered and blocked the attack. His own sword Ascalon was now clashing with the divine spear. I am sorry Cao, but I am the Issei Hyodo you will have to deal with, he stated. If you say so, he responded, turning his attention to future Issei and readjusting his weapon, trying to find an opening. The two opponents traded a few blows, the holy blade Ascalon, together with the power of the future Security, countering most of the spear's destructive power. During the short struggle, Issei could see some small changes going through his older counterpart's armor and modify his power. He recognized this as the "night form" of the technique called Triana, a technique that allowed him to imitate the powers of his evil piece, Knight, Rook or Bishop Modus for his scale armor, that his older self had shown them during their latest 3-day training. In this case he was fighting with the power of a Devil Knight. XXX at the same time, future Akeno was being attacked by Cao Cao's second-in-command Georg, Irina was struggling with Jean, a descendant of Jeanne d'Arc. And future Raynor was facing Siegfried and Heracles. XXX, a devil wielding a holy sword. Now, that is a surprise, Cao pointed out, after he had just countered another strike. But not nearly as much as seeing not only two, but three identical Red Dragon Emperors together. I am curious what kind of universe you come from and what had possessed you to become a devil. If it was even by choice, of course, knowing the devils and their ways. The last comment was quite close to the truth for future Issei. More than he would have been comfortable with a short time ago. But he showed no visible reaction. It didn't matter. He was long over it, he thought to himself. He had forgiven them all, Rias, Raynor, Akeno, Kiba and Kaneko. But I think you have made a mistake challenging me, Cao Cao told him. You mean because your true Longinus works most effectively against devils? Future Issei responded confidently. But I fear I have to disappoint you. You should know by now I have fought another version of you before. I know how your weapon works and your tricks, he told him. You go to Kuo and take care of whatever these Shah are planning. He turned to his two younger counterparts. I will deal with him, he said, looking at his opponent. Issei nodded. He exchanged a look with Exorcist Issei, who nodded as well. I am sorry, but I think I can't allow that. Karen, who suddenly appeared, interrupted them. He looked at present Issei. You and your group are members of the Guardians, aren't you? And if we are, it doesn't even really matter, the Shah leader responded. If you stand in the way of my plans for this world, you will die. He formed a powerful blast of energy in his hands and fired it at Issei, who concentrated his own powers to stop the attack. Issei would have tried to use the Sword of Kronos again to just stop time and with it the blast. But it was pretty clear that Karen was just too powerful to be affected by it. So instead he countered the attack in the regular way and channeled his own powers. Issei now let his full-scale armor around him and put all his energy into shielding himself. He stopped Karen's attack and was left with nothing but a few scorch marks. But it had cost him at least some of his strength. You can count on that we stand in the way of whatever you are planning, he told him confidently. I see, Karen replied. His hands were suddenly turning into metal and forming themselves into long, razor-sharp claws, ready to rip his opponent's body open. Then we need to take care of you all quickly, he said. But his swing was being blocked by the blade of Issei's weapon. The power of the Sword of Kronos, however, in fact, didn't affect him at all. It was the nature of his own power. Karen was a molecular shapeshifter. He was able to control the structure of his body and change it at will. Like right now. To that came a certain level of energy manipulation and at least rudimentary telepathic abilities. Issei's sword, however, manipulated time by influencing the movements of particles, in case of the frozen time, by reducing it to zero. Something that Karen's powers, by their very nature, were the perfect counter for, since he could control the molecules of his own form. Even if he hadn't also possessed more than enough raw power to resist the effect. His powers, of course, were not purely supernatural, but, like with all Shah, had their roots in manipulations in his gen code and cellular structure during the time of his creation. XXX. Now Didrag, let us begin, future Issei said. Of course, partner. The future version of Didrag answered. Suddenly another change went through future Issei's armor. The scales now turned into a darker, deep red color. The other two Isseis recognized this as well. Crimson Cardinal, a transformation their counterpart had achieved after he mastered the Juggernaut drive in his world. From this point on, Cao Cao didn't actually have a chance anymore. Future Issei's power and speed had increased drastically. Before he even fully realized it, he had already landed a first blow with escalation that broke through his opponent's defense and sent him flying backwards. If it had not been for his spear, Cao Cao would have been dead. Even as he activated his own balance breaker and used the various special abilities of his weapon, it didn't really help him. Future Issei, in this form, was able to shield himself or counter every single one of them. He was just too strong. And Issei knew that this wasn't even all of his counterpart's power. He had one even higher level. The one that allowed him to use power from Ophis. But so far he didn't seem to need it. Finally, Cao Cao used the strongest attack from his balance breaker General Treasure, and unleashed a powerful assault of powerful energy at his opponent. But even that future Issei was able to stop with his powers. Go now, he called out to the others. He decided to end this quickly and use his full power, and gave his Raynor and Akeno a mental signal to do the same and go all out as well. They both nodded. Future Raynor was suddenly surrounded by a mixture of flames and something that looked like solid dark shadows. She was now completely dominating her opponents, who were all incredible powerful sacred gear users and genetically modified superhumans in their own right. Light spears were appearing, seemingly out of thin air, all around the hero faction members and Shah troopers, while at the same time she was firing light beams at them from her hands. Future Akeno's eight-winged form was now completely surrounded by holy lightning, that she was sending out at her enemies. Georg was the only one of her opponents who was able to hold himself back somewhat, against her. But he too was quickly getting overwhelmed. Meanwhile Irina was still holding herself against Jean. While her opponent was a more experienced sword wielder, she had the advantage of both, the key control techniques they had learned from the Guardians and magical abilities she had gained from the soul shards of Merlin, that were now bounded to Zenobia and her. XXX Meanwhile with Raynor, she had been able to struck down one of the Shah soldiers who she, Rias, Akeno, Zenobia and Kiba and their exorcist counterparts were fighting. Her future counterpart, Akeno's counterpart, and Irina meanwhile were still busy with the sacred gear users. As she looked around, she saw that like herself, the exorcist versions of Issei and Irina had managed to free themselves from their opponents for a moment. I will take care of this, exorcist Issei said. This is my world after all. Good, we will transport you to Kuo, Gariel told him, with Raynor standing next to her. We will come with you too, exorcist Irina said, the rest of her team consisting of their Zenobia and Azasia standing next to her. And you can count us in as well, the Zenobia and Kiba from Gariel's own team said. They had just managed to force back their own opponents with the help of their versions of Akeno and Rias. Not far away from them Calawarner just managed to defeat another one of the enemy soldiers, a woman who had been attacking her with her bare hands, that had morphed into razor-sharp claws, and cut him down with her light spears. But she was wounded herself in return. Only for Raynor to use her improved twilight healing, to let the injuries disappear moments later. Go! Present-day Issei shouted to them. He was still locked in a fight with the Shah leader Karen. We can take care of things here by ourselves. But you have to stop the attack and save the Kuo of this world. No, Karen yelled angrily. I won't let you. But before he came to end this sentence, he was hit by a flying slash of Kronos blade that Issei sent to him. Now, he told them, before he and the rest of them recover. Okay. Thank you Issei, Gariel said to him. A magic circle appeared beneath her and others and one moment later, they were gone. XXXXXXX Kuo, of this universe they reappeared a few hundred miles away, right at the border of the town Kuo. What they saw as they looked into the direction of the city, was more or less what they had feared that they would see. One of the outer districts of the town was under attack. They could make out several houses that were burning. The streets in that area were covered with wrecked cars, and the dead bodies of dozens of citizens who had been murdered so far, men, women and children. They could also see the attackers. 3 figures who were flying over the place, with bat-like wings. This 3 had however already been confronted by the 2 devil groups who were actually living in this town. That meant Rias and Sona and their peerages. Most of the regular members of Sona's group were present, Tsubaki, Saji and the others. Rias was with Akeno and Kaneko, like in the world Raynor and Gariel knew. But instead of Kiba, they saw another young man in their group they didn't know, who had obviously taken his place as the knight. Devils. Exorcist Issei asked surprised. I don't believe these are true devils, Gariel stated. The Shah have a method that allows them to replicate the DNA of other species. They have probably transformed some of their own men. So they want to frame the devils for this, Azasia stated. And they certainly have no problem about being seen. He gestured to the 3 pseudo-devils, who were openly fighting and causing destruction wherever they turned to, when they were not busy fighting members of Rias and Sona's peerages. Gariel nodded. They were probably planning to devastate the entire town, possibly reveal the existence of the supernatural to the humans doing it and maybe killing Rias and Sona as well, she stated. All in all a good way to throw this world into chaos with little resources. The good thing is that we obviously found them early and they so far seem to have only managed to cause destruction in a small part of the town. One of the transformed Shah was in the moment being confronted by the native Tsubaki and Saji from the C-Tree group. Another was being targeted by their Akeno and Rias. But so far they were trying to avoid a direct confrontation and cause even more damage in the town instead. So far the two groups didn't seem to have noticed them, since they were still outside of the town and were hiding their energies. We need to stop them, Irina's counterpart said. Yes. But be careful. Remember, these versions of Rias and Sona don't know us. If we just jump in, they might think we are enemies as well, Gariel told her. Okay. I remember, she replied. But the best way to convince them that we are friends, is to take on the attackers, right? She, however, added a moment later. Right, Gariel replied. Good. The holy sword wielders of both groups draw their weapons. Wait a moment, Guardian Zenobia said to her counterpart and the others. Merlin, would you please? Backquote of course, a mental voice answered inside her mind. She held her blade in the direction of the fighting place in the town, and a moment later a powerful magical spell was unleashed over the combatants of both sides, that left the three attackers, as well as the real devils, for a few moments confused and disoriented. Very good Zenobia. It seems you have actually learned to think before you start to fight, Raynor commented. That was unnecessary, Raynor, Exorcist Issei stated, while they were already moving forward to attack. He was already activating his balance breaker once again. If it hadn't been for Zenobia's, Merlin's magic, both sides would have for sure noticed them by now. Yes, you should not talk to your comrade like this, Exorcist Irina said. Backquote even if you are right. She thought silently. Oh, don't worry about it. They know I am only making fun, Raynor replied. Right. I still don't appreciate it that you are teasing my girlfriend, Kiba commented. But we have other things to take care of right now. In the next moment Exorcist Issei fired a dragon shot, that he had been charging until now, that hit and annihilated one of the pseudo-devils. Raynor and Gariel sent a barrage of light spears at the other two. One of them was able to evade the attack, barely. But the other, still disoriented, was pierced through his chest and stomach and died moments later. So far so good. The local devil, as they had finally fully regained their senses, looked quite surprised as they saw who had just helped them. Fallen angels, and holy sword wielders, together. Tsubaki questioned surprised. What are you doing here? Rias demanded. This is devil territory. I warn you, if you try anything against us, we will. She couldn't help to be intimidated by the presence of so many holy swords, but in this moment she fully realized that some of the people who had just arrived, were looking, absolutely identical. Way to thank us for helping you, Exorcist Zenobia commented. We thank you for your help against these attackers. Whoever you are, Sona told them a bit more diplomatically. But you have to admit, your presence here is quite unusual. We are here to assist you against these terrorists, Gariel explained plain and simple. We have found out about what they were planning. They wanted to cause chaos in this town and then blame the devil faction for it. Of course this is the short version, but this is hardly the time to explain everything in detail. Wait a second, I recognize you, Rias said, looking at Raynor. You are a member of that fallen angel group that had been here a few months ago. The one that had sacrificed that nun. It was just like she had expected, Raynor thought. The Asia of this world was, as it seemed, dead. She winced internally. This were old stories, she forced herself to reply, and by the way, if this is backquote your territory, you have never just asked me to just leave it, have you? This was a bit of a shot into the blue. She speculated on that this Rias here would have acted the same way as the ones she knew. Going by the glare this Rias sent to her in this moment, however, she had been spot on. We have more important things to take care of, Sona said, turning to the last transformed Shah, who was flying before them in the air. They were all preparing themselves to take out the last enemy. Whatever questions there were between their two groups, could be cleared later. But before they had the chance, a powerful blast of electrical energy, resembling lightning, came down from the sky, and seemingly randomly, hit into the line of the devils. Yura, one of Sona's rooks, was directly hit, along with a few other peerage members who had received damage. She, however, they saw her body burn up and a second later, there was nothing left than a few charred remains and bones. Tsubasa Yura, at least the version of this world, was dead. XXX above them in the sky, another group of enemies was appearing, who had been hiding until now, and were now levitating above the town. In the center of these group was the dark-haired young woman, who had been part of the team, eliminating intruders earlier, and to her right, the mysterious creature known as Phantom, in his favorite host body, with 4 more warriors floating in the air by supernatural powers behind them. There are more of them, Gariel said. We have been careless. It had been unlikely that they had planned this attack with only 3 people in mind. Yura, Sona called out in grief and pure anger as she saw what had just happened to one of her servants, to a friend. Who are you? She shouted at the newcomers. My name is Kara, lieutenant of the Shah Empire. We are here to assist the 3 you have already met in their mission, the woman told them. Better said, we are here to make sure that you die in the fight, along with them. What? Exorcist Irina called out. These are your own people you are talking about, Exorcist Issei exclaimed. They had willingly volunteered this mission, knowing that it would result in their death, she responded. Their part was to cause as much destruction in the town as possible in the role of the devils, and then we could move into save this place from them and sadly, kill them in the process, to make it look more real, she stated coldly, together with the real devils of course. So this fallen angel was telling the truth. This was all a setup, the native Rias called out. What are you trying to achieve? We have recorded everything, you should know. In a few hours the human media would have gotten live scenes of devils attacking and killing humans. Along with hundreds of live witnesses. And then a few other attacks like that could have happened around the world. Your existence would have been revealed to the human race and of course their public would have hated you. Then we would have seen how strong your race is when you are dealing with a humanity that actually knows about your existence, instead of hiding under them like the vermins you are, she said with much venom. What? You are completely insane, native Rias shouted angrily. But it seems your appearance has thrown everything off, the woman calling herself Kara said to Gariel, Raynor and the others, not truly reacting to the outcall of the devil. It is truly sad, she remarked sarcastically. You have no chance, Gariel told her. We are simply too many for you. At her word, Exorcist Issei and his team were taking position next to her, with Raynor on the other side. The 2 devil peerages were going into fighting position as well. They might not completely trust their help, but it was pretty clear who was their true enemy. You may be right, Kara admitted. If our goal were simply to defeat you, she added. Destroy the town, she told the rest of her team. Cause as much damage as you can. One of the warriors next to her, and also the last one disguised as a devil, were gathering energy, to direct it down to the city. Another one had drawn a sword of his own and was ready to face his opponents. But before they had the chance to unleash their attack, Exorcist Issei had already cut one of them apart. And Sona had stopped the other with her ice magic, while her 2 knight were already moving to finish him off. The Shah named Kara herself channeled a powerful electrical energy, that was flowing through her entire body, and fired it at Raynor, who blocked the attack with her own power. The magic circle she had formed in front of her had stopped the assault, the fallen angel saw. But the attack had been dangerous. This girl was good, Raynor thought. Before her training, a few months back, she would have been slaughtered by this opponent. But now she was simply better than her, far better. XXXXXXX Karen knew one thing. They were losing. The truth was, they had no chance from the beginning. The first group of dimensional doubles who had suddenly appeared and saved their counterparts a few hours ago, he had no way to know that for them, it were actually a few days, was already dangerous. But this new third group had a power that was now completely overwhelming. He had just watched as the third Red Dragon Emperor, who was clearly the strongest of the 3 versions of him, just beat Cao Cao down as if he was nothing, and was now blasting away another couple of Shah soldiers. His power surpassed now even that of most gods. It felt practically infinite. The only beings he knew of, who were even more powerful, were both the lords of the Dark Order and the leaders of the Guardians. What was even worse, the Issei Hyodo who was native in this universe and a few of his allies had just left the battlefield a few minutes ago, to stop their attack on the town Kuo. And there was nothing he could do about it. Their troops here were getting beaten easily. XXX At this moment future Raynor found an opening in the defense of one of her opponents, and pierced a light spear right through Siegfried's body. The, on the first look ordinary, spear, had actually enough compressed energy to destroy at least a middle-sized city. A second later she saw his face become expressionless and his dying body sinking to the ground. Heracles and the other members of their team were enraged as they saw their comrade falling. But there was nothing they could do. They were still losing. XXX Karen could only glare in helpless rage at the ones who had as good as ruined his plans for this earth. He would make them pay, he promised to himself. Backquote, that is enough. They all suddenly heard a mental voice echoing over the entire area. Backquote, your plans for this world had promise. But they have failed. You are all good warriors, but you are simply outmatched by this enemies. They all recognized the voice. Faust, how he was currently calling himself, one of the lords. Issei recognized the voice as well. Both, the future and present version. Future Issei from his confrontations with him in his past, or rather future, and present Issei from the visions he had seen of Gariel's memories and from recordings he had seen during his training in the world of the Guardians. Seemingly out of thin air, a number of dimensional vortexes appeared around them, a way for them to leave this world. Backquote, draw back for now, he declared. Backquote, there will be other chances for you to prove your commitment to our cause another time. Karen could only listen in silent rage as one of their masters declared his entire operation a failure, and told them to simply turn around and leave. You tell them to retreat, Issei addressed him. This fight has become senseless. Testing yourself or proving your convictions by fighting down to the last man has its place, yes. But not right now, the voice answered him. Backquote, the soldiers here are dying against you and your future counterparts would prove nothing that we don't already know, Issei Hyodo. Or would you disagree? He asked him. Backquote, it seems you disagree, Karen, Faust addressed him. Lord Faust, my plans, my ideas, have been completely ruined. I want vengeance, he exclaimed angrily. Backquote, I see. Faust's voice replied. Backquote, if this is your choice, who am I to deny you this? You and any of your soldiers who volunteers to, can stay behind and continue this fight. Everyone else, leave this world now, he told them. Most of the Shah soldiers were following Faust's order and passing the opened portals. Over 20 of them were leaving. Only a half dozens of Karen's officers and closest followers stayed behind. Our mission has failed, he said quietly to the officer next to him. It is time for Plan B, take care of them for a few moments. Buy me some time, he ordered the others, while he himself was drawing back, to the entrance of the crashed ship. What the? He is planning something, Issei said, as he saw Karen about to enter the ship. They all saw what he meant and he and the others concentrated on the group of remaining Shah that was standing between them and Karen. But the seconds they needed to eliminate them, got him the time to get inside and disappear. XXXXXXX alternate Kuo exorcist Issei was facing off with the creature calling itself Phantom. While Raynor, Gariel and the others, together with the devils, were busy dealing with the Shah officer Kara and the rest of her team. Like their allies miles away, they were quickly gaining the upper hand. Issei's counterpart concentrated more of his power and channeled it into a wave of magical energy against his opponent. Ironically, it was a similar ground principle like the technique many of his counterparts had developed, the dress break. But instead of destroying the clothes of his target, this here focused on momentary stunning and immobilizing it instead. Like he had intended, the technique broke through Phantom's defenses and made him an easy target for Issei's dragon shot. The eyes of the formless body snatcher's host body glowed in a bizarre deep yellow, just before the attack vaporized it. For a short moment, Phantom's true, incorporeal essence manifested itself in the air before them. But then it was gone. A few seconds later Raynor hit Kara, who had been sending wave after wave of energy at her, that the fallen angel countered, with a light spear in the shoulder. The wound was far from fatal, but enough to give the Shah serious trouble if she truly wanted to continue to fight. Issei's exorcist team and the devils had meanwhile eliminated the rest of Kara's strike team. It was over, at least here. The next moment Faust's mental message and his order to retreat was all over the area. Yes, it was over. The Shah called Kara gave them a short look, and then she teleported away. I would advise you to repair the damage these maniacs have caused so far and erase the memories of all humans who have seen this, Gariel said to Rias and Sona. You don't have to tell us this, Rias replied irritated. This is our town. We know better how to deal with this than some fallen angels. Normally I don't like the idea of manipulating people's minds, Exorcist Issei stated. But I admit in this case it might be the right idea. These people were intentionally trying to reveal your existence to the humans and turn them against you. You should do what you can to make sure they won't succeed in the end. We will leave now, Gariel told him. We will go to help the others. What others? Sona wanted to know. Simply put, these were not all of the group responsible for this attack. Right now the rest of our team is taking care of the rest of them, the fallen angel explained. In that case, I wish them good luck, Sona said, visibly angered by the loss of her rook and the damage in the town. I couldn't agree more, Rias stated. She and Sona still didn't trust these strangers, but they admitted, they were at least far better than their opponents. Wait, Exorcist Issei said. Let me go. Like I said, this is my world and it should be me who have to take this menace down. Besides that, you all have helped us and I want to repay the favor. Please, stay here and help the devils to take care of things in the town. Raynor, you possess twilight healing, so please help take care of the wounded. And especially, make sure that it is truly over, that this Kara doesn't return with even more soldiers or something. Raynor and Gariel exchanged a short look. Look, Exorcist Issei said, I promise I will do everything to help your Issei and the others. I just believe that I should be the one to help to end this. Okay. Gariel finally agreed. We will take care of things here. And you are right. Someone should stay here for the moment to help out, and make sure that the Shah won't try to do anything to Kuo again. But, Raynor wanted to say something. I know you want to help Issei. But that is something his counterpart can do as well. Now look around you, you are needed here. The entire district had been turned into a battlefield. At some places were still injured humans lying on the streets, houses had been destroyed or were burning. Even some of the devils were not looking well. Gariel was right, she was needed here, or at least the twilight healing was. Fine, Raynor gave in. But if something happens to my Issei because I wasn't there, I will do what my counterpart should have done and kill you, the said grinning. You will have to go through me first then, Exorcist Irina answered. Let us go Issei-kun. I will come with you. Irina. Don't even say anything Issei-kun. If you want to risk your life for this world against those maniacs once again, so can I. And besides that, I love you and want to be at your side. She grabbed his face and placed a kiss on his lips. A second later Exorcist Issei formed a magic circle and they teleported away. XXXXXXX The crashed spaceship Future Issei cut one Shah officer's head off with escalation, after a backquote fight, that was too short to even be called one. Akeno and Future Akeno eliminated two more with a double strike of holy lightning. Issei took another one down with the sword of Kronos and Irina cut the last one down with her Excalibur. But these few seconds gave Karen what he had wanted. He was inside. Issei blasted the entrance of the ship open and they followed him. I have a bad feeling about this. Whatever he is planning cannot be good, he told the others. I agree with you, Future Issei said. If he just wanted to run, he would have left the battlefield. He is after something. A few moments later that meant the two Isseis, Future Raynor, Irina, Rias and the Akenos, found Karen, in the engine core of the ship. He was using his powers once more, but in a way that none of them would have expected. He was touching the metal of the machines. In fact, for a moment, his hands seemed to be literally merging with the metal, and it nearly looked as if his energy was somehow connecting itself with them. Issei reached out with his senses to him, and it felt nearly as if Karen's energy and that of the ship had become one. His power had now risen drastically and rivaled that of a Mao. But at the same time, it seemed just to be too much for him. Issei could sense that the energy flowing through him seemed to damage Karen's body on a cellular level. The power he had absorbed into himself seemed to literally slowly killing him. But the Shah commander didn't seem to care. What have you done? He asked him. Karen in response sent him a grin that could make the blood freeze in someone's veins. If this world won't be saved from itself by me, he stated, then it shouldn't exist at all. To put it simply, he grinned. I have bounded my life energy to the power core of the ship. And I have now set it to overload. In a few minutes it will explode in Japan, and the greatest part of Eastern Asia will be gone. What? Issei called out. Oh, and if you are thinking about attacking me before that happened. Since my own energy is connected to the reactor, should I die, it will destabilize and explode as well, he declared. So, what will you do now, Issei Hyodo? Karen blasted a large hole through the ship's hull, lifted off the ground and floated outside. Can you do something to stop him? Issei asked his future counterpart and the ones of Raynor and Akeno. Maybe, future Issei answered. If we are fast enough and manage to completely disintegrate both him and the ship. Maybe. He asked. I should not have used Diabolus Dragon. It would be easier if I hadn't spent so much energy, future Issei admitted. I could have defeated Cao Cao without problem. But I wanted to end the fight as quickly as possible, to prevent something like this here from happening. Damn it. Suddenly Issei's and Irina's exorcist counterparts reappeared close to them. We are back. We have succeeded. Kuo is safe, exorcist Issei greeted them. The others are all okay. How are things going here? Exorcist Irina asked them. Future Issei was sending them a grim look. He has connected himself to the ship's reactor and turned it into a giant bomb. He pointed to Karen, who was levitating in the air before them. In a few minutes, it will go off and destroy the half-continent. And if we kill him, it will explode even earlier. Is that explanation enough for you? What? Cao Cao, who had just managed to come up again after his beatdown from future Issei, said in shock as he overheard their conversation. We could also try to contain the explosion, future Raynor offered. If we form a circle, we could possibly stop it. This area here would still be destroyed, but at least not the rest of the country. But that will only work if we can shield this area from all sides at once, future Issei stated. In this moment both the ship and Karen himself started to send out a mixture of particle radiation and powerful supernatural energy. Had his opponents been something else but supernaturally gifted fighters, that alone could have killed them. It was clear that his suicide technique was not far from its conclusion. You thought you had won, didn't you? He called out. You have ruined my dream of a new world, and now I will drag you all to hell. Present Issei remembered something. He thought back to his fight with Valley during the peace conference. He remembered the short glimpse of that new kind of power he had during that struggle, and his training afterward. If he could, then maybe. I have an idea, he said. I think I know a way to stop him. But I won't guarantee that it will work, he told them. So you should also try your idea to form a shield around this place. We will. What exactly do you want to do? Exorcist Issei asked him. It's a bit hard to explain right now. But as you know, our powers are somewhat different from each other. I believe I have a way to completely remove him without his bomb going off. Like I said, without any guarantee. But it is worth to try. Issei's eyes fell on his comrades. They were all visibly exhausted. A few of them looked barely able to stand. They had been fighting the entire time. It was clear that they were at their limit. Irina, Rias, Calawarner, Akeno, I want you to leave, he told them. Return to our world. You just want us to go and leave you behind. Irina asked him. There is nothing you can do here anymore. Don't even pretend otherwise. I know your powers are completely exhausted. Trust me, I will come back as well when this here is finished. I just want you out of the way for this, so I don't have to worry about you as well. He is right, Rias said, laying a hand on her shoulder. As much as it hurts to admit it, we are completely useless here. We are only in the way. Let us go back and wait for Issei to finish this. She is right, Calawarner said. She was already activating the transport device on her wrist. This is not your world, Exorcist Issei said to them. You have already done more than enough. Finally Irina gave in. We will see you later, Issei, Akeno told him as she stepped through the portal that her own hand device had formed. Rias did the same thing a moment later. In a few minutes then, Calawarner said, as she was leaving in the same way. Then Irina gave Issei a quick kiss before she opened a portal on her own and left as well. You have good friends, Issei, his exorcist counterpart told him. Even if you are all completely perverted, Exorcist Irina added smirking. But I think in the end you are not really that different from us. Then let us begin, future Issei said. Wait, they were suddenly interrupted by another voice. We will help you as well. It were Cao Cao and his team. XXXXXXX home dimension of the Guardians. It was in a small town, not too far from the London of this earth, where the Guardian headquarters was located. Here, somewhere in the middle of a city festival, was sitting a seemingly young man, together with a girl, a pretty young woman with dark brown hair, just outside of a small restaurant. The two were sitting together, talking, drinking, flirting with each other, and even a bit with others. On the first look, they seemed like a normal young couple, who was just trying to enjoy the day. The second part was correct. Later they would maybe spend the night with hot sex. Nobody could have guessed that the girl was in fact over 200 years old, and the young man was even far older. That they were anything but normal people. He was nobody else than the Guardian leader, currently calling himself Darian, and she, the girl, was the current host of the cosmic being known as the Spectre. Like Issei's team, they too had returned from another mission, just a few days earlier, and were now spending some time for themselves. Then, however, they were suddenly being interrupted by a man in a dark blue outfit, who came flying down from the sky, and landed right next to him. Cal. Darian greeted him. It was Kal-El, alias Clark Kent, also known as the versions of Superman, who was part of his group. Darian. Sarah, you are still using that name, are you? He addressed the girl. Yes, but I am actually thinking about changing it soon, she responded. Don't worry, you are the first I will tell my new name, then Cal, or should I say, Clark. But then, maybe I will then be Sarah, again in a few centuries, who knows? Or maybe I will simply return to my birth name for some time. Around them, people were staring in their direction. No wonder, it was not every day that Superman was just landing right in front of you and starting to talk with some people. And a few of them had already started to suspect that the young couple was all but normal either. It seems you have disturbed our free time, Cal, Darian told him with a light smirk. I am sorry that I am interrupting your attempt to pretend to be normal, Darian, Kal-El interrupted him sarcastically. But the last of our mission teams that we have to send out in the search for Galad has just returned. The one that got into the battle with the Shah. I see, Darian answered. What is their state? Only 2 of them had made it, Cal replied. Out of 12, he said in Sarah's direction. That means the team is nearly a complete loss. I see, Darian replied. For a short moment, he said nothing. In the end, it was to be expected, he stated grimly. With the report we have already gotten from the Green Lantern, we knew something like this was to be expected. It is just worse as we thought. How were the losses of our allies? He wanted to know. About half of the Green Lantern team is gone, Cal told him. By what we are told, some of our people had been covering the retreat for them, and that caused part of our losses. In fact, the Green Lanterns are thanking them and all of us for their noble sacrifice, he said. I understand, Darian replied. With the exception of a few recruits, these are the first people we have lost in over a year now. But we all knew this couldn't be avoided, Cal. It's starting again. For the last decades, our 2 sides have only been moving around each other without actually making a real strike. We couldn't have expected things to stay like this forever. He turned to Sarah. You have heard it. There are things I have to take care of. Clark is not wrong. You know, she commented. What we are doing here, what we are always doing. Yes, we are doing it for fun. And yes, it is fun. But we both know there is also another reason why we are doing it. The same why you are sometimes traveling the world, when you could simply appear anywhere whenever you want, why we are renting an apartment in the city, when we could have easily materialized an entire palace out of thin air or hundreds of them, why we are still having sex, or why we are hanging out at parties like this one. We are doing it because we like it, because we feel like it, but also, she stated, and you know that, to convince ourselves that we are still human. We are human, Darian responded. We have to be, he said a bit quieter. It is our original species and what we are at our core, Sarah. No matter what kind of powers we have achieved. Maybe we are, she replied. But we could also simply be something that has outgrown this universe, and has no longer a place in it, she added a little quieter. Do you want to believe that? He asked her. No, she answered. Then don't, he said. What we believe about ourselves has more influence on us than most people would think. It is just. Do you know how often I asked myself how it would be to go back to when my life was still normal? Before I joined you, Before I became what I am now. Had your life truly been normal? He asked her. You had been a kind of superhero in your world after all, even before you met us. And given that you were involved with him, even back then, normal, was certainly a relative term for your life. Actually, I had been more something like a mercenary or a very irregular soldier. Simple irregular soldiers usually don't fight global threats on a regular base, Darian remarked. I think you qualified as what we normally call a superhero, even if you didn't call yourself that. And how was I supposed to know that the man I was in love with was in truth a being only as the dark man in my world? She asked rhetorically. It was only later that I found out who Seth, or Mordred or Damien or Faust or whatever he calls himself, truly is, she said. As I remember, that knowledge didn't keep you from getting it on with him again a few times more later, he commented smirking. Okay. I admit it. She grinned back. I guess that is the reason they say the heart is stupid and blind. It is not, Darian replied. It would only be if you let it affect your judgment and let you do things that you wouldn't do otherwise. Of course, we had to be completely sure that we could trust you, despite your feelings, he pointed out. But, whatever is between you and him, you are still here, with us, aren't you? Instead of sitting at his side. Yes, I might be fucking a Dark Lord and Cosmic Destroyer from time to time, she replied sarcastically, but I am still here, fighting against him. Exactly. You are, he answered completely serious. That alone should tell you something. Maybe, the nameless girl replied. But still, I am seriously thinking about giving these powers to someone else. None of the other candidates is even close to being ready, Darian reminded her. They will be sooner or later, she stated. If there is one thing we have, then it is time, she said. She laid forward and placed a quick kiss on his lips. Who would have thought? Me, one of the concubines of two knights of the Round Table who had both become cosmic beings at the same time. She chuckled. What I wanted to ask you. This body you have recruited, Hyodo, do you think he will become like us? To be honest, I am not completely sure yet, Darian replied. It is hard to say how exactly his powers will develop, even for me. He might become like us or not. I have watched some possible futures for him, but it is not sure how this one will turn out. I see, she answered. The girl watched as he and Kal-El were leaving together. They just disappeared through Darian's power and reappeared at another place. XXXXXXX somewhere else. Another universe. As soon as Irina had arrived, she realized that something wasn't right. As she had passed the portal, she found herself close to a city. But it was clearly not Kuo. No, it's several times larger than Kuo had ever been. She could see skyscrapers at the center of the town. Something that didn't exist in her and Issei's hometown either. Where am I? She asked herself. And where are the others? Merlin. She spoke to the soul shard inside her. Do you know what happened? We are not where we are supposed to be. So much is clear, the spirit answered. And while my expertise is magic and not technology, I think it is safe to say that the portal somehow malfunctioned and sent you to the wrong place, very likely also to the wrong world. The reason could possibly be the strong energy radiation your enemy had sent out right before you left. Maybe this had interfered with the transport. You mean we are lost? Irina cried out inside. As she had come closer to the town, she could make out a town sign at the border of the settlement. Academy City. She read it. No, she had never heard of a place like this. And with a town of this size, how could she not have heard about it? Unless Merlin was right and this was not her world. Akeno was in a similar situation like Irina was. In opposite to her, the place she found herself in was clearly Kuo. But she could not hold back her shock as she returned to the villa that had been the base of Issei's team for the last months, and found it still an abandoned ruin, like he had been before that. She also found no signs that anyone had lived here in the last years, except maybe the stray devil visor, who had occupied it for some time. She quickly came to the same conclusion as Irina and Merlin did. This was not her world. Something had gone terribly wrong. She thought for a moment about using the transport device again, but then decided against it. It had originally been programmed to open a portal back to her home world. But if it had instead sent her here, wherever that was, then there was no telling where she would land if she tried again. And she had no idea to reprogram this thing by herself. At least this was Kuo, even if it was clearly the wrong one. It was better if she waited for the others to locate her. If they did. Where were the others? Had they returned safely or were they in the same situation? What about Issei and the rest of their team? How long would they need to start searching for them? How long until they even realized she was gone? She knew that they would have to deal with this Shah first. But she was sure that Issei would succeed in whatever he planned, he had to. Akeno felt so lost ever since her mother died and she was on the run from the Himahima clan. She tried to force down her fear, and failed. Where should she go to? She asked herself. The others would find her, she told herself. But it would take some time. Where should she go until then? As she calmed down a bit, she realized that there were only a few choices, Kuo Academy or Issei's house. But did Issei knew her in this universe? Did he even live in Kuo in this world? Did he possess the boosted gear? Would he be able to do anything to help her? Would he even want to? On the other side, did the Rias here even know her? Was she part of her peerage here too? For all she knew they could be mortal enemies here. She was the daughter of a fallen angel leader for heaven's sake. She decided that Issei was the safer option. In the worst case he would just not know her, instead of attacking her on sight. As she had finally arrived at Issei's home, she rung at the door. She was waiting for a minute and became more and more nervous. What if the Issei of this world hated her for some reason? What if he had never been born? At least she could read on the door that the Hyudas lived here. As it was finally opened, she took a look at the person who had opened the door, and felt how her jaw dropped. It was a brown-haired girl with glasses, wearing a Kuo school uniform. The girl was wearing her hair in twin ponytails, she looked quite thin and had no breasts to speak of. All in all she looked quite average and not really attractive, and she was human, Akeno was sure of it. But as she looked at her face, it couldn't be. Rias? She asked in complete shock. Yes, the girl answered, clearly not in a good mood. Will you now come inside Akeno or continue to just stand there and stare at me with an open mouth? She asked her. Somewhere else, Calawarner and Rias were in the same situation. They both had landed in Kuo, but not the same Kuo they came from. Meanwhile in the world they had started from, the Shah leader Karen was continuing with his attempt to destroy himself and everyone else with him, and Issei with his idea to stop him.